When Maruo rushed downstairs, she didn't even glance at Suemo. Her eyes were locked onto the BMW SUV, gleaming with a light that only appears when someone in utter desperation suddenly sees a lifeline. Suemo stood in the shadow of the dormitory building, his body covered in the sticky black blood of zombies, a fresh wound still oozing on his arm. He had been standing guard here all night. Li Hao leaned casually against the car door, his hair slicked back with the kind of confidence that only someone who could still stand tall on the seventh day of the apocalypse could manage. The slight smirk on his lips was carefully curated, a mark of someone who knew they held the upper hand. "How gee, I knew you'd come for me," Maruo exclaimed, her saccharinely sweet voice dripping with trust as she hooked her arms into his. Suemo called her name. It was only then that she turned to look at him, but her gaze wasn't the look of a stranger. It was worse, a gaze that saw him clearly and decided he wasn't worth another second of attention. "It's the apocalypse, Suemo. What can you give me?" she said calmly, without any pang of guilt or need for explanation. "Brother Hao has a Class C talent, a car, and insider information from the military. And you? A broken-down bike and grease-stained clothes." Her words landed with no hesitation, just cold reasoning, as if this conclusion had long been inevitable. Once, Suemo and Maruo had been the most envied couple in the finance department. But that was before tragedy struck. After losing his parents, Sumo dropped out of school to work, fixing cars, delivering takeout, saving every bit he earned to buy her lipsticks and handbags, believing he was keeping their shared future intact. When the apocalypse began, Sumo had been working late in a garage on the west side of Shing City. After her message reached him, he crossed the city on foot to get to her, risking everything. The supplies in his backpack, bottles of water, packets of compressed biscuits, a few cans of meat, were the result of perilous scavenges over the past few days. Every item in there had nearly cost him his life. Just half an hour ago, the wound on his arm was the price he paid to snatch a bottle of water from two zombies that had cornered him. Li Hao glanced at Sumo's bulging backpack casually and said, "Ruo, isn't that all for you? Go ahead, take it." Without hesitation, Maruo stepped forward and tried to yank it from him. Her nails dug into the back of his hand, drawing blood. Suemo clutched the backpack tightly, not out of stinginess, but because it contained everything he had to survive. His hands shook, not only from anger but from sheer exhaustion after 7 sleepless nights. He couldn't let go of the backpack. But even more gut-wrenching was the sudden realization that he had lost everything else. No allies, no backup plans, no future. The red mist was closing in from the city's edges, swallowing everything in its path, living or undead, into a pulsing pool of foul blood. Li Hao talked about a safe zone east of the city. But Suemo, knowing cars, had picked up on the subtle, unhealthy hum of the BMW's engine. And yesterday, he had seen with his own eyes that the eastern road leading out of the city was blocked by a collapsed overpass. Li Hao didn't know, or maybe he just didn't care. He only needed a glimmer of hope, real or not, to convince others to follow him. Suemo locked eyes with Maruo, trying one last time to say something. But she doubled down, her nails digging deeper. It was in that instant, all his anger boiled over. By the 7th day of the apocalypse, Suemo found himself lying on the ground, unable to stand from the searing pain in his abdomen. It wasn't a zombie that had taken him down. It was his girlfriend's new man. Li Hao's kick came with a force that didn't belong to an ordinary person, sending Suemo flying. His backpack was ripped from his grasp, and pain twisted deep in his gut. On the ground, all Suemo could do was watch as Maruo snatched up the backpack without sparing him another glance. She handed it to Li Hao as though presenting a precious treasure. "Here you go, Hao Ji," she beamed. "It's all good stuff." Li Hao weighed the bag in his hands, nodding with satisfaction before tossing it into the back seat. He stared down at Suemo with an utterly dismissive look, the way someone might stare at a bug under their shoe. "Weakness," Li Hao said, his voice cold and matter-of-fact, "is the ultimate sin. No money, no power, no strength. You're just trash." Maruo nestled into his embrace, but before leaving, she threw a final sentence back, without even looking at Suemo on the ground. "Suemo, I know this seems cruel, but all you lost was some money. I gave him my youth." The car sped off, its tires kicking up dust. 3 years. Suemo lay on the ground, utterly broken. His supplies? Stolen. The girl he had once trusted? Gone. Not even the apocalypse had gifted him a reason to keep fighting anymore. Nearby, zombies started shambling closer, drawn to the noise. Their decaying bodies moved with an eerie slowness, closing the distance between them and Suemo. He stared blankly as if seeing nothing, his mind cleanly void for the first time in days. He felt it, the deep fatigue, the overwhelming sense of surrender. Maybe it was time. Maybe there was no point anymore. It was right at that moment when, buzz, a blinding beam of light shot down from above, enveloping Suemo in its brilliance. A cold, metallic voice cut into his fading consciousness. Detected, extreme despair and overwhelming hatred. Matching prerequisites for highest binding protocol. SSS class, unique talent. Fortress heart, successfully activated. The searing pain in his abdomen ebbed instantly, retreating as if it had been erased. Suemo froze, stunned, and then slowly pushed himself halfway off the ground. He knew what this meant. 7 days into the apocalypse, information hadn't been completely cut off. On the road to survival, he'd gleaned snippets from survivor forums, piecing together fragments of the new world order. 80% of the global population had turned into zombies. Of the 20% who hadn't, half were dead within the first week, victims of disease, hunger, the zombies themselves, or the relentless creep of the red mist. Of those who lived, only a rare few awakened talents by killing zombies. These abilities, unpredictable, diverse, and powerful, were the currency of survival in this cruel new age. Suemo had killed a stray zombie once. He had barely survived the encounter, but nothing triggered. He assumed he was among the countless powerless. But he remembered reading a speculative thread deep in the forums. A theory that true awakening didn't necessarily come from a first kill. Sometimes it came from the edge of despair, from the kind of fear that scraped against death itself, or from an unrelenting wave of hatred. The first kill, it seemed, was just an easier way to light the fire of potential. The instinct to fear and survive wasn't enough, at least not the kind of enough that could get Suemo through this. But in that moment, when he was kicked to the ground, when 3 years of trust was discarded like it was nothing, when his supplies were stolen and he was left surrounded by approaching zombies, teetering on the edge of despair, everything dark and twisted within him collided. And as if fueled by that chaos, the blood moon inside him blazed to life. SSS rank. A one-of-a-kind gifted ability. Suemo stood up slowly, his gaze locking onto the zombies inching closer. His eyes were nothing like they had been before. What exactly this Fortress Heart ability could do for him, he hadn't fully grasped yet. But there was one thing he now understood. Liao had been wrong. It wasn't that weakness was a crime. It was that someone else had had the upper hand. And now he had it. Through the cracks in the dorm door came the sound of zombies clawing to get in, a disjointed rhythm, like a countdown ticking away. Suemo leaned back against the door, panting for breath. Not from exhaustion, but from anticipation. His attention was fixed on a single line of text, suspended deep within his consciousness. It was cold, clear, and etched there with absolute certainty. Fortress Heart, SSS rank. He'd seen the data before, skimming through materials on gifted abilities and their rankings. The tiers spanned from F to S. S-ranked abilities were considered strategic-level assets, rare, with fewer than 100 known across all of China. Each S-rank ability user was fiercely sought after, the kind of person survival bases would fight tooth and nail to recruit. But S-rank and beyond, there were no verified reports, no eyewitnesses, not even serious discussions. Talk of such abilities was more like telling a ghost story. And now, Suemo held in his hands the very thing from those stories. He didn't immediately pursue Li Hao and Ma Ruro. The off-road vehicle they took was long gone. Those two, who had thrown him to the zombie horde, assumed they'd finished him off for good. They probably thought he'd vanish from the apocalypse on its very first day. But Suemo wasn't focused on them just yet. He wanted to figure out exactly what he had on his hands. Sumo was a mechanical specialist, a former auto repairman who'd worked on countless vehicles. As he stared at the ability's interface hovering before him, its logic clicked into place almost instantly. He understood the whole system in one glance. By making direct contact with any metal object, he could disassemble it instantly. The salvaged materials wouldn't vanish, but would instead convert into fortress points. Those points could then be fed into a bound vehicle, upgrading its armor, enhancing its weaponry, boosting its engine, and even unlocking advanced technologies like space-folding mechanisms in later stages. In essence, this was a self-sufficient, fully armed, mobile fortress. And in a world where the blood-red mist could shrink at any moment, where fixed bases were just future graveyards in disguise, this ability, this mobile fortress, was the ultimate survival tool. Sumo's gaze flickered to the chaos of the dorm room around him. Clothes were scattered everywhere, and the air was still cloyed with the faint remnants of Maruo's perfume, a sickly sweetness that only made him feel nauseous now. His eyes landed on the metal frame of the bunk bed in the corner. He walked over, stretched out his right hand, splayed his fingers wide, and pressed his palm against the cold steel pipes. Buzz. It wasn't an explosion. There was no bright flash of light, just a strange, rippling sensation that coursed up from his palm. It felt as if the entire structure of the bed had turned into a transparent blueprint inside his mind. Every weld point, every load-bearing detail, it was all laid bare with perfect clarity. The information surfaced. Confirmed disassembly? 15 seconds later, the entire bed frame vanished. Silently. No shards, no echoing crash. Only the wooden slats of the bed, left without their metal supports, fell noisily to the ground. Disassembly successful. Fortress points, plus 15. Proficiency, 15/100. Suemo stared at the now empty space for 2 seconds. Outside, the zombies were still banging on the door. Clenching his fist, his mind began working fast. One bed, 15 points. How many beds were in this building? How many derelict vehicles were scattered across this city? How many tons of scrap metal waiting to be discovered? Li Hao and Ma Ruo had sped off with their stolen off-road vehicle, gloating as if they'd scored some massive victory. Suemo didn't even feel the slightest regret. What he needed now wasn't some pre-made car. What he needed was raw material. And time. There was much left to be done. At level 1 of his ability, with only 15% proficiency, he didn't even have a vehicle bound to him yet. But the zombies clawing at the door? They'd serve as a decent start, not for fighting, but for buying him time. He scanned the room once more, his eyes landing briefly on every metal object. The folding chairs, the radiator pipes, the window frames, the hinges on the doors, the iron storage boxes under the beds. Plenty to work with. He'd start with this floor, strip it down to nothing, and then move on to the rest of the building. The moment that faint metallic film spread over his palm during disassembly, Suemo knew this ability was far more valuable than he'd initially expected. Disassembly didn't just earn him points. The system had rewarded him with a bonus ability, metal manipulation, armament. Triggered by mental focus, it allowed a matte finish protective layer to form beneath his skin for 1 minute, giving him a hardness that seemed to defy belief. He tested it without hesitation. With a single punch, he dented the side of an iron locker. The sound reverberated through the room. The metal caved in, but his hand was perfectly fine. No pain, not even a scratch. That meant one thing. He no longer had to avoid close combat with zombies. But Suemo didn't waste time dwelling on the implications. There were still entire chunks of the dorm room to break down and feed to the system. The bunk bed frames, the metal storage cabinets, the aluminum window frames, the locks, the hinges, the towel racks. Every piece of scrap was systematically disassembled. Fortress points accumulated steadily, one step closer to leveling up. There was even a brief moment of absurdity. A lavender-colored silicone object rolled out from under someone's pillow, a product still in its packaging. Its label brazenly advertising features like ultra-thin spikes and long-lasting vibration. Suemo froze for a second, staring at it. The memory was brief but crystal clear. Maruo's shy voice whispering, "I want to save my first time for my wedding night." He didn't say anything. He just continued taking apart the iron bed frame. When the points hit critical mass, the system prompted an upgrade. Fortress Heart leveled up from LV1 to LV2. The process of disassembly sped up, but far more importantly, he unlocked 2 new functions. Vehicle Scan, a feature that allowed him to instantly assess any vehicle's make, condition, and core components with a single touch, and Special Modification, a mechanic that let him customize bound vehicles with rare materials for unique upgrades. Sumo's lips curved into the faintest smile. When he came across those two words, a vivid image appeared in his mind for the first time. It wasn't just a car that could drive, but a true, mobile fortress built for war. And then his stomach gave a loud growl. He pressed a hand against his abdomen, realizing what was wrong. Not long ago, he'd replenished his food supply, so he shouldn't have been hungry again so quickly. However, the more frequently he used his abilities, the faster his energy drained. That drawback was becoming achingly clear. Until he could secure a stable food source, he'd have to pace himself. The sound of scratching at the door was growing more urgent. The zombie security guard had been lingering outside for quite some time. Sumo handled the situation quickly and decisively. Focusing his mental strength, he reformed the metallic coating over his right arm. Then he yanked the door open. The zombie lunged forward from sheer momentum, claws outstretched toward his face. Using power from his core, Sumo swung his coated right arm like a sledgehammer. *BM star. The impact hit dead center on the zombie's face, caving its skull with a sickening crack. Without a sound, the creature was flung backward and instantly silenced. That was the first successful test of close combat viability. But outside the dormitory stood an entire lot of abandoned cars. Hunger hit even harder right after a fight. It took Sumo less than 3 seconds to take down the zombie in the hallway, yet his body was already issuing warning signals. The energy expenditure from his abilities had only accelerated his gnawing hunger. Clutching his rumbling stomach, he made his way toward the cafeteria, the only place on the campus where food might still be found. When he got there, he took one sweeping glance and saw nothing. The door had been smashed open, tables and chairs were overturned, and the floor was littered with scattered, spoiled ingredients. Anything edible had been looted. What remained was either rotting or tainted. Even the collapsed bodies of zombies in the corner seemed more useful than the scraps left here. Swearing under his breath, Sumo turned around and headed for the parking lot. Food would have to wait. The more pressing issue now was finding a vehicle. The red mist was inching closer to the campus, and this location couldn't be safe much longer. Walking wasn't a viable option. With close combat consuming too much energy, he needed a vehicle that could move, carry supplies, and endure the apocalypse. On top of that, he had just unlocked a new ability, vehicle scanning. Once within range of a car, he could instantly perceive the state of its engine, fuel level, and damages. It was like having a mechanic's diagnostics tool hooked up directly to his brain. If he'd been working in an auto shop, Sumo thought, this power would have made him a top-tier master mechanic years ago. Unfortunately, what this ability revealed now was a grim picture. The parking lot had already been looted. Windows were shattered, doors hung ajar. Clearly, people had scavenged in a panic during the early days of the apocalypse. Sumo went from vehicle to vehicle. One sedan had a broken chassis and an empty gas tank. An electric car's battery was swollen, completely unusable. A motorized scooter was intact and fuel-efficient, but its tiny size could barely carry more than 2 bags of rice. He found an off-road SUV in decent condition, with half a tank of fuel. For a moment, his eyes brightened at the scan results, until he saw the gas mileage, 25 liters per 100 kilometers. At that rate, the thing would be out of fuel in no time. His criteria weren't complicated: durable, fuel-efficient, and roomy. Yet every car in the parking lot was either damaged, guzzled gas, or lacked storage space. Suppressing his growing hunger, Sumo trudged deeper into the chaotic parking lot, moving toward the most secluded corner near the wall. It was a dark, nearly forgotten area, shielded by several larger vehicles. There, his eyes caught sight of a boxy silhouette. The ultimate people's car, the Wuling Hongguang. It sat there, unassuming as a brick, so ordinary it was easy to overlook. Sumo paused for a second, then walked over and activated his scan. When the data flowed into his head, he almost forgot his hunger. The engine was in good condition, with only light carbon buildup. The gearbox shifted smoothly with no leaks. The chassis was intact, and the suspension was fully functional. Structurally, the body was sound save for a few paint chips. The gas tank even had 25 liters left, and it boasted a fuel efficiency of 7 liters per 100 kilometers, a theoretical range of 360 kilometers. The only issue: the battery was drained, meaning the car wouldn't start right away. That's it. Suemo had experience in car repair. Dead batteries barely qualified as a problem. If the battery wasn't completely fried, jump-starting it would suffice. If it was, swapping it out would be a trivial task. Among all the vehicles in the parking lot, finding a usable battery wouldn't be hard. 7 seats, foldable and removable. The design left plenty of room for modification, supply storage, or even a makeshift bed. Its simple structure meant parts were common and easy to swap. In the car repair world, there was an old saying about this vehicle: you don't need a manual to fix it. Take it apart and reassemble it. 9 out of 10 mechanics could do it blindfolded. In an apocalypse, that kind of reliability was worth its weight in gold. Sumo crouched down and placed his hand on the car door to confirm the lock wasn't jammed. All the while scanning the parking lot for other vehicles that weren't completely trashed, he'd need a working battery or a set of jumper cables. His stomach grumbled again, louder this time. Ignoring it, he resolved to get this car up and running first. Food could wait. The minivan didn't look like much. Its paint was faded, the body dented in a few spots, and the interior carried the gritty smell of a workhorse vehicle long used by construction crews. Dust, oil, and faint traces of tobacco. In the chaos of the apocalypse's first week, no fleeing survivor would have given it a second glance. People had been preoccupied with grabbing food, medicine, and weapons, not hauling around shovels and wrenches. But Suemo looked at it with an intensity no one else could understand. When his right hand pressed against the hood, the system notification synced with his heartbeat and echoed in his head. Binding successful. You now have absolute control over this vehicle, including telepathic operation. Suemo sent a mental command: unlock. Click. The central locking system disengaged, and the car emitted a soft noise. Lin Yao clutched her phone tightly, wrestling with her thoughts for a long time before finally sending a message to Suemo. The process happened silently and imperceptibly. That was the ability of Fortress Heart. On the surface, it only seemed to bind and control vehicles, but deep inside, Suemo understood that the true potential of this ability was far from being fully realized. The problem, however, was that no matter how powerful the ability was, surviving today came first. He climbed into the driver's seat and quickly glanced at the situation in the back row, a reclined seat piled high with tools. There were shovels, ropes, canvas bags, a small portable gasoline generator, and an empty fuel container. Then, he noticed a box of bottled water and a supermarket logoed plastic bag next to it. Without hesitation, he lunged for it. Inside the bag, he found over 20 packs of braised beef-flavored instant noodles, a few bags of pickled vegetables, 2 packets of sausages, a portable electric stove, and a kettle. The engineering team who owned this vehicle seemed used to working overtime, solving mealtime issues right in the car. Yet now, on the 7th day of this apocalypse, this stash of food had effectively become life-saving resources. Suemo didn't bother with niceties. He unscrewed 2 bottles of water, gulped them down, crushed the instant noodle block with his hands, and ate it dry. He threw in 2 sausages after, barely pausing to chew. Only then did he start to feel alive again. After recovering, he plugged his phone into the car's charger, leaned back in the driver's seat, and for the first time, carefully opened the upgrade interface he'd been waiting to access. Current Fortress points, 102. The options appeared in 5 categories: defense, mobility, firepower, survival, and spatial folding. The prices range from 100 points to a staggering 1,000 points, a tenfold difference. Suemo made his judgment almost instantly as his gaze swept over them. None of the others mattered for now. Defense was the most immediate issue. This vehicle couldn't withstand any significant collision, and on these apocalypse-ridden streets, many forces would try to tear through it. Armor enhancement, basic 100 points. Just enough. He left 2 points in reserve as his starting capital. Confirm upgrade. Side effect: increased vehicle weight and approximately 3 liters more fuel consumption per 100 kilometers. Suemo froze for a second. He hadn't anticipated the added fuel consumption, but it made sense. Energy conservation. More weight meant more fuel usage. This simple logic wasn't going to be overturned just because the world had ended. It also meant one more task needed immediate prioritization: finding a gas station. Confirm. A low hum emanated around him as a golden metallic glow began to rise from the lowest parts of the car's frame, as though something unseen was flowing and restructuring itself. The glow enveloped the entire vehicle in a quiet, orderly manner that was oddly satisfying to watch. In the corner of Sumo's vision, a countdown timer appeared. 9:59, 9:58, 10 minutes. He could only wait. He picked up his phone, now charged to 5%, and idly powered it on. On the 7th day of the apocalypse, most areas were already without water and electricity, and network coverage was becoming spotty at best. He wanted to check the map to find the nearest gas station. This turned out to be a trickier problem than he initially thought. By this stage of the apocalypse, satellites should have long since been reduced to space debris. Yet, curiously enough, not only was cellular reception still available, it was even more stable than before. No one knew who or what was maintaining this network. Perhaps some awakened individual had inherited a peculiar ability to keep it functioning. But the how didn't matter to most people. Every smartphone now had a pre-installed app called Survivor Forum. It skipped through permissions, bypassed any form of review, and installed itself directly. There was no one moderating the app. The truthfulness of the content was for users to judge themselves. Suemo switched the channel to Xingqing. A glance at the posts was enough for him to grasp how desperate the world had become. A pinned official notice stated that the red mist was advancing east at 1.2 kilometers per day, urging immediate evacuation. Scrolling down, there was a team called Bomb Man Brotherhood, recruiting combat-enhanced ability users ranked E-class or higher, promising equal distribution of resources and a harmonious atmosphere. Such posts didn't interest Suemo, and he skimmed past without stopping. Further down, one post caught his attention. A B-class ability user offering shelter in a western suburban bunker, with some questionable conditions. Applicants had to be women aged 18 to 30, childless, with no exceptions. Cross-dressing men may apply for trials, the post read. The reward was 300 grams of bread per day, but applicants were required to send non-filtered, untouched photos first. The final line of the post read, "Ugly and sickly women, don't bother." Beneath that post was another one right next to it. "I'm a D-class agile ability user. My 12-year-old sister can communicate with small animals. We only have half a bag of rice left. Is there anyone passing through the Eastern District who can take us along?" Suemo scrolled past without lingering. He composed his own recruitment post, something direct and practical. Mobile War Fortress recruiting. Priority given to ability users and skilled professionals. Come with proof of value. Contributions recognized accordingly. No freeloaders. No nonsense. He posted it, but it was immediately buried under hundreds of similar daily posts. There was nothing particularly unique about his to make it stand out. Just as he resigned himself to it, his phone vibrated. It was his first direct message since the apocalypse began. The sender's profile picture showed a young woman. "Master Su, are you there?" Suemo immediately recognized the name, Lin Yao. She was the same age as him, a promising resident doctor emerging from years of rigorous education at Xingqing Central Hospital, backed by a prestigious family in medicine. 6 months ago, her car had been serviced at Sumo's shop, and she had added his WeChat contact for follow-ups. Their message history was bare. It mostly consisted of her asking about error lights, him diagnosing a transmission issue, her thanking him, and the conversation promptly ending. That was all. The night the blood moon rose, she had just finished a surgery and was resting in her apartment near the hospital. She had some food and water stocked up and, like many, thought survival was just about waiting for rescue. A week later, her supplies were nearly depleted. Help hadn't arrived, and the forum shattered her naive expectations by showing her the grim truth. More terrifyingly, the red mist outside her window was beginning to come into view. She'd tried venturing out for supplies, but the moment she opened her door, she witnessed her neighbor being torn apart by a horde of zombies in the hallway. She stepped back inside, locked the door, and never opened it again. Without any abilities, she had no leverage in any survivor group. And in this apocalypse, her appearance wasn't an asset, it was a liability. She had likely read that post about the suburban bunker too. Lin Yao clutched her phone tightly, overcome with hesitation, before finally deciding to reach out to Suemo for help. What did that mean? She only had to think for a moment to figure it out. Battery at 2%. The red fog was closing in. She'd already seen enough of those forum posts to know what kind of people would demand a photo before speaking another word. Then her eyes fell on Sumo's post. There was something familiar in the tone, like the precision and clarity of someone who explains complicated things without wasting breath. Like the time he broke down that gearbox issue on her car. On a whim, she decided to send him a message. Now Sumo was staring at his phone screen, but his thoughts revolved around one simple question. Where is she? And can she still make it out? Asterisk asterisk. Actually, I don't look half bad. Lin Yao froze as soon as the words left her lips. Her back pressed against the cold wall, her phone glued to her ear. She had just uttered the most humiliating phrase of her life to a man she barely knew, and during the literal apocalypse. She hadn't wanted to say it. It was the result of reading recruitment posts on the forum. Countless threads made it brutally clear. Women without abilities or combat skills were at the bottom of the list. Behind the supplies. Behind even the men who could drive. Some posts had blatantly stated, "Looks matter." In this world, that was the final door left ajar for those deemed useless. And Sumo slammed that door shut with a single sentence. You misunderstood me. I only take people who bring value to the table, not pretty faces. Looks are just a bonus. His tone wasn't mocking, not even condescending. It was just matter of fact. A plain truth laid bare, leaving no room for argument. Then, goodbye, Dr. Lin. Final and absolute. Lin Yao knew exactly what that meant. She knew better than anyone what came after. She should have stayed silent. She should have said thank you, hung up, and figured out a plan B, or accepted there wasn't going to be one. But something inside her chest ignited. Not fear. Anger. Rage buried deep for over 20 years. A cocktail of insults and accusations. She's had plastic surgery. She cheated on exams. She only got into her doctoral program for sleeping with the dean. She endured years of grinding through medical school and residency with just 4 hours of sleep a night, splitting time between scrubbing into surgeries and living in the library. 3 consecutive years as the top student in her field. And what did that get her? Pretty girls like her couldn't possibly achieve that without help. Sumo was just the last straw. Sumo? Wait. Lin Yao unloaded 20 years' worth of fury into the receiver. A doctoral candidate at Star City General Hospital. Top of her class for 3 years straight. She passed every exam with flying colors. Not because of connections, not because she cheated, but because she trained herself to memorize every muscle, every blood vessel, every connection of bone in the human body. Because she committed herself to late nights, endless studying, and relentless pursuit of excellence. And then, for the first time in her life, she swore out loud. Then, she said something she'd regret replaying for the rest of her days. I'm still a virgin, for crying out loud. Does that satisfy you? By the time she screamed the last word, she didn't have any strength left. Her back smacked against the wall, and the only sound left in the void was her own shattered breathing. It was pitiful. So much for the campus beauty. So much for the medical genius. In that moment, it was all a cruel joke. She didn't wait for Sumo to respond. She didn't want to hear ridicule, nor did she want pity. Shaking fingers hovered over the red button. End it. Send me your location. For words. Cold. Clear. Without warning, they came through the line. Lin Yao's hand froze a centimeter away from her screen. Her mind went blank. She thought she misheard, but the words repeated in her head, over and over. He agreed. On instinct, she clicked Share Location, staring at the small spinning circle. It turned a quarter. Half. 3/4. The screen went dark. No lag. No warning. Not even a final, flashing red battery icon. Just silence, black as pitch. She didn't know if the location had sent. And on the other end of the line, there was nothing left. Sumo stared at the words call ended on his screen without moving. He dialed her back. No answer. Dead battery? Or something else. Between the two possibilities, there was a chasm he couldn't ignore. It had only been 2 weeks since the world ended, and countless posts like hers had already surfaced in the forums. Desperate voices, designed to lure people to an address, only for them to be greeted with a trap. Sumo had seen it. He'd even walked into one. Maruoru's betrayal wasn't something he could forget, and he didn't get second chances at making the same mistake. But Lin Yao's final words played themselves in his mind on repeat. It wasn't the sobbing plea of someone begging for help. It was the determined, almost obsessive pitch of someone selling her qualifications. Trauma care, pharmacology expertise, emergency medicine. She laid out her skills one by one, as if she knew her hand wasn't strong enough and that every card had to count. Scammers didn't operate like that. They aimed for sympathy, not negotiation. He considered his own situation. An SSS tier ability, Fortress Heart, capable of upgrading vehicles, building defenses, and creating mobile strongholds. It was the kind of skill everyone dreamed of. But at the end of the day, a bullet to the shoulder could infect just as easily. Claws from the infected. Sabotage from other survivors. A wound festering quietly in the dark. His ability was great for the machines, but useless for his own fragile body. In a pinch, a competent doctor was worth more than half of the combat-based abilities out there. And Lin Yao hadn't awakened yet. That alone was revealing. It meant she hadn't killed anyone yet. Her awakening path was still undetermined, making her a blank slate full of potential. Suemo scrolled through his chat logs. 6 months ago, Lin Yao's car had come in for a routine checkup. They'd arranged pickup through a home visit. One geotagged message sat there, clear as day. Building 7B, underground garage entrance of Biyun residences. He matched it with the details the fragments overheard on the call replayed in Sumo's mind. Biyun Yaju, Building 7, Unit B, a perfect match. She's really there, he muttered. Both memory and record pointed to the same place. At the very least, it proved that she hadn't lied about this. Suemo pulled up the map, the southern district of Star City. The direct distance wasn't too far. However, a glance out his window reminded him of reality. Abandoned cars littered the streets. Toppled billboards turned entire blocks into mazes. The 30-minute trip suggested by the map could easily double under the current conditions, if not worse. The sun was setting fast. He could recite the pinned warnings from the Apocalypse Forum by heart. Nights in the apocalypse are deadly. Zombies are far more active at night. Their response times drastically increased under a blood moon. Mutated creatures hidden in the shadows of the city at night are unpredictable and far more dangerous than during the day. Unless absolutely necessary, avoid traveling after dark. In her apartment, Lin Yao had no idea what Suemo was thinking at that moment. All she knew was that her phone was completely dead. She hadn't seen where the progress bar had left off, so she wasn't sure if the message had been successfully sent or not. Darkness consumed the room entirely. With the curtains drawn, not even the faint stray lights from the desolate streets outside could make their way in. She had gathered everything she could find around her. Practical trauma surgery, emergency medicine handbook, essentials of clinical pharmacology. A stack of thick medical books sat tightly clutched to her chest. An emergency kit she had pulled from her nightstand rested nearby. Adrenaline syringes, strong antibiotics, sterile suture kits, a tourniquet. This was her entire arsenal. She forced herself not to dwell on the terrifying questions. Had the address gone through? Would he think it was a trap? Would he recognize the location? She held on to one certainty. 6 months ago, he had been to this neighborhood. He had delivered a car, walked that particular road. He knew where Building 7, Unit B was. Pressing her back against the cold wall, she hugged the books and emergency kit even closer, her eyes glued to the door as her ears strained for any sound outside. What she needed to hear was the hum of an engine. Suemo started the car. The sky clung to its last threads of light. Time was slipping away quickly. But in his mind, one thing became crystal clear. If Lin Yao really was in trouble, waiting until daylight might mean she wouldn't survive the night. Conversely, if this was some kind of trap, he was prepared. Either way, he had a plan. What lay ahead? He didn't know yet. The time left before complete darkness? Less than 10 minutes. Sitting in the driver's seat, his eyes fixed on the dull, gray-yellow horizon ahead, Sumo's thoughts kept circling back to one grim reality. Zombies at night were an entirely different beast compared to daytime. They were faster, more aggressive. And those mutated creatures that prowled only at night? Their movements were impossible to predict. Driving across half the city now was a gamble akin to stepping into a meat grinder. He needed a safe stopover, and he had to reach it before night fell. Just then, a notification chimed in his head. The system's voice echoed. Armored reinforcement, level 1, upgrade complete. A dim, metallic sheen faded away from the car's exterior. Suemo tapped on the side of the door with his knuckles. The deep, heavy sound it gave off was clearly different from before. The entire vehicle was wrapped in a matte dark gray protective layer. The hood, doors, windows, undercarriage, and tires, every inch was fortified. The texture looked far more durable than the original steel frame. The car's appearance remained unimpressive. It was still the same bland, utilitarian vehicle. But in terms of durability, it was a whole new beast. The cost, however, was straightforward, an immediate 15% increase in weight, with fuel consumption jumping to 10 liters per 100 kilometers. Glancing at the fuel gauge, Suemo saw it held just 25 liters. Good for 250 kilometers, which sounded like plenty. But in the apocalypse, refueling wasn't exactly an easy feat. That number would only get more depressing as time wore on. His mind quickly landed on a nearby spot, a moderately sized gas station on the way to Byunyaju. Its remote, off-road location meant it might have been spared from the looters. It wasn't just convenient, it was essential. After upgrading to Fortress Core Level 2, a new modification panel had been unlocked. The system mentioned that rare zombies or mutated creatures had a chance of dropping special items like mutated cores or alien metals, which could be used to further enhance vehicles, upgrading them with unique attributes. However, the zombies Suemo had dealt with so far were low-level grunts. Nothing special had dropped. He made a mental note to hunt for tougher targets when the time was right. For now, survival came first. Shifting into gear and releasing the handbrake, the van pulled smoothly out of the parking lot. It didn't take long before two figures appeared directly in front of him. Tattered work clothes, rotting gray skin, two wandering zombies. The growl of the engine drew their attention instantly. They both snapped their necks toward the noise. Suemo had seen that unfiltered hunger in their eyes far too often before. It was an insatiable desire for living flesh, raw and primal. Their movements were unnerving, faster than what was normal for zombies. Suemo had witnessed countless cases of regular vehicles smashing into zombies over the past weeks. The results were never pretty. Cars ended up with shattered windshields, deformed hoods, or worse, radiators blown apart. Even if the zombies were hit, the damage to the vehicle could easily turn fatal. But this time, he didn't slow down. His foot slammed the accelerator to the floor. He drove straight at them. Bang, bang, asterisk asterisk. Two dull thuds, followed by the unmistakable crack of breaking bones. By the time the blood moon rose fully into the sky, Suemo barely had time to breathe a sigh of relief upon reaching the gas station. Because then it came, a single, deafening roar tearing through the night from miles away. This wasn't the usual screech of a zombie. Those sounds were trivial, hollow compared to this. This was something massive, powerful, and old, its voice carrying the weight of a long, restrained fury unleashed. When Suemo turned his head toward the horizon near Star City University, he realized something was terribly wrong. The skyline wasn't the same anymore. A silhouette was forming, something enormous emerging from the shadows. Giant creature slowly straightened up, its height equivalent to a 30-story building, as if a titan had walked out of ancient myth. It raised one massive hand. Boom! A dormitory building crumbled instantly. With just one strike, bricks, steel beams, decades-old architecture, all reduced in a heartbeat to a small mushroom cloud of dust and debris. Suemo stared at the rising plume of smoke, silent for just a few seconds. He had known the apocalypse was dangerous. But in his mind, danger looked like the kind you'd expect: a world overrun by zombies, collapsed buildings, looters, and food shortages. He'd never imagined it could look like this, a 30-story giant casually slapping buildings just for fun. He forced his gaze away and refocused on the quiet, unassuming gas station in front of him. 2 hours earlier, Suemo hadn't been this calm. It was the eyeball on his windshield that forced him to pull himself together. The zombie had lunged at his vehicle at full speed, only to be demolished by the car's momentum. Skull fragments, bits of flesh, and streaks of sickly yellow-green goo splattered his front windshield like someone had smashed an overripe tomato against it. The rain wiper? Still swinging, and carrying a bloodshot eyeball that swayed with every vibration of the car. Suemo braked hard, took a deep breath, and flicked on the windshield wipers. As the muck cleared, his view ahead sharpened. He saw two zombies plastered against a distant wall, their mangled bodies left like grotesque nail heads hammered into the brick. Bits of their insides were smeared all over the crumbling facade. He glanced at the car itself, the front bumper, untouched. Windshield, spotless again. That dull, matte gray composite armor covering the vehicle's frame, it hadn't chipped a single bit. This was the first-tier defense reinforcement provided by Heart of the Fortress, and it had only cost him 100 resource points. Suemo sat silently in the driver's seat for a few moments and then let out a laugh. Not the laugh of someone relaxed, but the kind of laugh someone gives when they see a glimpse of opportunity. Standard zombies were no different from throwing eggs at a stone wall when it came to his reinforced car. If 100 resource points could achieve this, what would happen if he invested more? He began imagining incremental upgrades, better armor, heavier firepower, quicker mobility. With higher levels of reinforcement, But no, he stopped his train of thought, twisted the steering wheel sharply, and drove onward. As he continued, the roads became increasingly treacherous. Fallen billboards, collapsed utility poles, and mountains of rubble blocked his path. Several stretches were impassable, forcing him to reverse and detour multiple times. Over the journey, 7 more zombies tried to intercept him. Each met the same fate as the first, and his car's exterior remained unscathed. With every collision, his confidence grew stronger. That confidence wavered again when he reached the gas station. Its iconic red and white canopy appeared just as the last traces of daylight drained from the horizon. Overhead, a sinister blood moon hung ominously, casting the entire street in eerie shades of crimson. The number of zombies roaming the area had noticeably increased. Shadows shuffled out from abandoned shops and hidden alleys, some dragging broken limbs. Faint, guttural howls echoed in the distance. Inside the station itself, from what he could hear so far, just the sound of the wind. Suemo parked his vehicle in the shadowy corner by the entrance, then killed the engine. The anti-theft light on his dashboard blinked faintly in the pitch darkness, steady and deliberate. The safest option was obvious: stay inside the car and wait until daylight. His armored van, courtesy of Heart of the Fortress, was essentially a portable bunker. There wasn't a chance that regular zombies could pry their way in. But he also knew one thing. Those survivors in the Apocalypse forums who had landed rare resources and god-tier gear on the first day, not a single one of them had gotten it by sitting tight, waiting for sunrise. His talents required resources. His skills needed resources. Standing still meant falling behind. He was weighing his options when he heard the roar. The plume of dust still hovered somewhere in the direction of Xingqing University. The 30-story monstrosity had bowed its head again, seeming unimpressed by its latest act of destruction, before retreating back into the shadows. Sumo's gaze lingered a moment longer in that direction, his fingers lightly drumming on the steering wheel. The gas station was right here, close enough to touch. Inside lay the supplies he needed. And that colossal creature? It was a few kilometers out, moving in an entirely different direction. For now, he pushed the car door open and slipped quietly to the ground. The first thing to hit him was the stench, thick gasoline mixed with something sweet and rotten. And under the dim, flickering lights of the station, that's when Suemo got his first real look at it. It wore what was once a gas station attendant's uniform, stretched taut over a grotesquely swollen, deformed body. Its left forearm was entirely gone, replaced instead by a nearly 1-meter-long fuel nozzle fused grotesquely where its limb should have been. Its body was coated in layers of hardened grime, and its decaying face displayed a sneering, cruel expression that sent chills down his spine. This wasn't just an ordinary zombie. The forums had warned about this kind. Standard infected generally retained a vaguely human form, but elite class variants could radically transform parts of their bodies to gain overwhelming power. This one, it had chosen a weapon. Originally, Suemo had entered the gas station for one reason: supplies. Just before he noticed it, he'd seen a brief flash of orange through the glass doors, a shimmer that only elite mutants dropped. Energy crystals. He needed that for vehicle modifications. The crystal was there. And now, so was this thing, standing in his way. The flames started spreading across the driver's side door, and the situation escalated fast. The confined space of his car was inundated with the overpowering stench of gasoline, and the temperature shot skywards. The reinforced armor could withstand impacts, but not fire, not prolonged exposure. If the interior caught flame, his fortified vehicle would turn into a metal coffin. Suemo didn't hesitate. He shifted gears, pulled the handbrake, reversed out of the immediate fire zone, and then slammed the accelerator. The grotesque fuel nozzle zombie froze, caught off guard by the sudden aggression. But as a member of the elite class, its reflexes snapped into action quickly. Its fuel gun arm swung to aim directly at Sumo's windshield, unleashing another fiery spray. Intense heat waves engulfed his car, filling his view with nothing but flames. And then, in that critical fraction of a second, Suemo issued a single internal command. Asterisk, heart of the fortress, open the door. Asterisk, click. The lock disengaged. Suemo rolled out of the driver's seat in one swift motion, the fiery wave barely missing him, but still leaving a searing heat across his back. The car, however, didn't stop moving. No one was behind the wheel anymore. Nothing would make it slow down. It barreled forward, its reinforced front slamming unabated into the zombie's midsection, crushing it against a row of steel shelves and pinning it against one of the station's structural support beams. The gas pump's nozzle arm was still flailing madly, yet the tip of the nozzle had been crushed and deformed, spraying fuel in every direction. Enduring the burning pain searing across his back, Suemo forced himself to his feet. The chaos outside was growing louder, and time was running out. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and grabbed the writhing gas pump hose with his right hand. The icy touch of the metal seeped into his palm as he stared at it intently. A thought flashed through his mind. Metal manipulation, break it apart. The power of the fortress of the heart surged through his arm as he focused all his willpower on the metal tube. This was it. The moment to see if his ability could dismantle the body of an elite-level mutant. As the hose disintegrated into particles and was completely drained of all its energy, Suemo finally exhaled in relief. The elite zombie's mutilated body was now wedged lifelessly in the rubble, with its head obliterated by a single punch, a brute force strike, plain and simple, but effective. The system's notifications flashed before his eyes. His fortress ability proficiency had increased, but more importantly, there were two notable gains. A pea-sized crystalline core tumbled from deep within the skull cavity, warm to the touch and pulsing with a distinct energy. Alongside it was a handful of thin, dark red fragments resembling willow leaves, blazing hot, incredibly dense, and edged with faint flame-like patterns. An elite-level crystal core. Fire type. Among survivors' forums, these cores were as good as currency. Only killed mutants of elite level or higher dropped them, making them invaluable materials for crafting weapons, powering devices, and refining enhancement serums. The fiery metal shards, on the other hand, were pure utility. The Fortress of the Heart provided succinct but precise information. When fused into armor, they granted fire resistance, and when integrated into engines, they boosted efficiency. For Sumo's battle-scarred vehicle, scorched and riddled with burn marks, both items were desperately needed. The risk had been worth it. Carefully, he secured both items into his close-fitting backpack and stood up, only for the world to start spinning. The inhaled smoke hadn't fully cleared from his system, and combined with the strain of consecutive metal manipulation and dismantling efforts, his physical and mental reserves were entirely drained. Summoning his remaining strength, Suemo stumbled back into his car. His mind locked the vehicle doors as he cast a glance at the outer layer of the car's armor. The coating had been burned away in large sections, with parts showing signs of melting. Thankfully, the main structure remained intact, and the fire had been extinguished. He couldn't spare more thoughts on the matter. His head slumped, and he fell into unconsciousness almost immediately. He had no idea how much time had passed. A sharp knocking sound broke through the void, jolting him awake. It was early dawn. The blood moon had receded, and sunlight filtered diagonally through the windshield. Sumo's head jerked up instinctively, his gaze snapping to the source of the noise. A woman's face was pressed against the glass. Her skin was unnaturally pale, her eyes red and swollen. Her torn t-shirt exposed her collarbone and shoulder strap. Her voice, trembling and edged with desperation, seeped through the window crack. "Help me. Please, take me with you. I'll do anything." The scene was cinematic. Her lines were spot on, and the timing had been orchestrated perfectly. perfectly aligned with Sumo holding onto his most valuable items, perfectly coinciding with the exhaustion of his weakest moment. This chapter's title was fittingly named A Gentle Trap in the Apocalypse. Sumo's current dilemma wasn't whether to save her or not. It was whether he had the strength to discern what stood behind this door asking for help. When the cold barrel of a gun pressed against his temple, Sumo didn't move. Not because he was paralyzed with fear, but because he had anticipated this moment from the start. Rewind a few minutes. When the woman initially knocked on his car window, Sumo had already seen through her act. The strategically torn neckline, the perfectly timed tears, the rehearsed and fluent plea for help. There was a flicker in her eye, betraying her actual interest, not in him as a person, but in the vehicle he occupied. Survivor forums had warned repeatedly about such traps, combining allure and cries for help to lure victims into confined spaces and ambush them. Sumo had encountered it too many times before. After the incident with Maruruo, his instinctive wariness of sudden kindness had only grown sharper. Yet he still opened the car door. Because she had mentioned 2 barrels of gasoline, half a box of water, and a backpack full of food. These were things he couldn't afford to ignore. So he walked in, fully aware of what awaited behind that door, and fully conscious of the price he was prepared to pay for those supplies. Now, with the icy barrel pointed straight at his head, the man called Zhang Chong grinned, his teeth flecked with dried blood, speaking with the kind of cheap arrogance that made his words sting. "You idiot. So damn easy to trick. With brains like that, how the hell did you think you'd survive out here?" His injured left arm was wrapped in filthy cloth, while his right hand gripped the gun aimed steadily at Sumo, pressing just hard enough to convey a threat, but not with the tension of someone ready to pull the trigger. The woman, Lu Qian, had blocked the doorway, now holding a knife. Her tear-soaked and pitiful expression had twisted into something sharp and scornful, her voice shrill. "Brother Chong, grab the keys. There's bound to be food in his car." Sumo's eyes scanned the small bathroom they had cornered him in. The cramped space reeked of urine and blood. A dim, nearly dead emergency light flickered. 2 enemies, 1 gun, 1 knife. Zhang Chong's left arm was useless, and Lu Qian stood nearly 2 meters away from him, blocking his exit. The gun barrel was still pressed against his temple. Zhang Chong kept talking, kept grinning, entirely oblivious to the fact that the creature he had trapped might not have truly been restrained. When the gunshot exploded, no one moved to flee, nor did anyone attempt to dodge. Sumo merely raised his right arm. The bullet struck the matte black metallic layer, sparks scattering as the deformed bullet harmlessly clattered to the ground. Both Zhang Chong and Lu Qian froze in place. The smug smile on Zhang Chong's face hadn't even fully faded before being replaced with sheer terror. Lu Qian's grip on the knife visibly wavered. This was no ordinary survivor. In the apocalypse, the mere mention of the word awakened was enough to turn schemes into last rites. Zhang Chong still tried to fire a second shot, but his wrist was gone before he had the chance. The sickening crack of snapping bone was clean and efficient, the handgun flying through the air in a flawless arc. Sumo wasted no time. His hand immediately clamped down around Zhang Chong's throat, single-handedly, to piece her life together. When the world crumbled and chaos spread, he didn't forget her. Instead, he made her a target, obsessively tracking her down in a world already overrun by death and despair. Now, standing in her ruined doorway, his gaze carried that unnerving mix of twisted affection and predatory hunger. Lin Yao tried to suppress the bile rising in her throat, holding her ground despite every cell in her body screaming to flee. "I promised myself," Brother Long continued, voice smug and oozing with self-satisfaction, "that when I found you, I'd protect you. No one would dare touch you but me." He gave her a crooked grin, the kind meant to be charming but came across as nothing short of revolting. "And here you are, even more beautiful than I imagined." Her grip tightened around the fruit knife. It was small and almost laughable compared to the brute force of the man in front of her, but it was all she had. Her mind was racing, calculating, refusing to accept defeat. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. His grin dropped, replaced by a scowl. "Don't play hard to get, Doctor. It's the end of the world. Options are few, and I ain't in the mood for games." "Then you're wasting your time." she retorted, her tone sharp enough to cut through the suffocating tension. For a split second, even she was surprised by how firm the words sounded. Brother Long took a threatening step forward, and the grip on the knife in her hand turned her knuckles white. "You don't get it, do you?" he growled, his demeanor switching from mock affection to menacing frustration. "This isn't a negotiation. You're mine now." Before she could respond, there was a sudden noise outside, a guttural, awful sound that made the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. For the first time since barging in, Brother Long hesitated, his head snapping toward the window. The undead were close. The momentary distraction gave Lin Yao a brief window, and she didn't hesitate. Raising the knife, she lunged, aiming for anything vital she could reach. The blade found flesh. Brother Long roared in pain, stumbling back as blood seeped through his shirt. His reaction was instinctive, a violent backhand that sent her reeling, the knife clattering to the floor as her vision blurred from the impact. The noise, however, had done something unintended. The creatures outside had picked up on the commotion. Their snarls and desperate growls grew louder, closer. "Stupid bitch." Brother Long snarled, clutching his wound but still advancing on her. "You think that's going to stop me? Hell no." Lin Yao struggled to pull herself to her feet, her mind in overdrive. She might not stand a chance against him in brute strength, but she could think, and thinking was her only weapon. "If I'm going down," she spat, her breaths ragged, "I'm taking you with me." The commotion outside was reaching a climax. Heavy pounding sounded against the walls of the building, and soon it would be too late for either of them. And that's when she made a choice. Twisting herself toward the shattered doorway he'd left behind, she let out the loudest scream she could muster, a piercing, desperate sound designed to draw every shambling nightmare outside straight to them. Brother Long's eyes widened as he realized what she had done. "You crazy." His words were cut off by the first window giving way to a mass of decaying limbs and rotten faces. Their attention was locked on fresh prey. Lin Yao didn't wait to see the rest. As the chaos unfolded, she used the opening to make her move, slipping past the stunned man and bolting for the hallway. Her heart was in her throat, her legs burning with the effort as she sprinted down the corridor, the sounds of carnage rapidly filling the space behind her. She didn't look back. In this world, looking back was as good as giving up. At this point, "Come on, check out my talent," he said. The moment the words left his mouth, his face started to change. Not just his expression, his entire face transformed. The shape, the features, the texture of his skin, it was as though he had swapped masks. In 1 second, he looked like a popular young celebrity. In the next, a buff fitness influencer. Finally, his face settled into the likeness of Chunyu. Only the eyes were different, crazier, more malicious, amplifying the sleaze by at least tenfold. The shapeshifter. He could become anyone. Lin Yao gripped the fruit knife in her hand, her back pressed against the wall with nowhere left to retreat. "Stay right there," she warned, her voice trembling but resolute. "Take one more step, and I'll take you down with me." Brother Long didn't even pause. He took another step closer. "You know," he said, his grin widening, "I prefer them fresh. And if you die, it's not a big deal. I know someone with a talent called puppeteer. They can turn people into permanent dolls, your face, your body, forever mine. You won't ever leave me." This wasn't just a death threat, it was something far worse. Lin Yao knew this man wasn't bluffing. She hesitated for only a second. Then, in one swift motion, she flipped the blade, pressing the sharp edge against her own cheek. "You like my face so much? Fine. I'll ruin it myself." For the first time, Brother Long's facade cracked. Instinctively, he lunged forward with a panicked shout. "No, stop." Then came a muffled sound. It wasn't loud, and it was brief, almost anticlimactic. But Brother Long froze in place. Lin Yao watched as a hole appeared in his forehead. Before she had time to process what she saw, something warm and wet splattered across her face. The smug grin he'd been wearing just a moment before was frozen in grotesque permanence. Someone else was in the room. There was the faintest sound as a blade was pulled from the back of Brother Long's skull. His body crumpled to the floor, kicking up a puff of dust as it hit. Standing at the doorway was Su Mo, calmly wiping the blade on the leg of his pants. He didn't even spare Lin Yao a glance. Lin Yao's mouth hung open. She forgot how to breathe. She was a doctor. She'd seen death many times before. But death in the operating room was nothing like death here. In the OR, you fought with everything you had to pull someone back from the edge. Here, in the span of 2 seconds, someone had been casually erased from existence. You packed everything? Suemo asked, his tone as casual as someone discussing the weather. Lin Yao knew who Suemo was, or rather, she'd come to know him through that recruitment poster. It had said just one thing. Asterisk, we only take useful people. Emotions? Talk about that after you survive. Asterisk, when she first read it, she thought it was cold. Now, standing over the still twitching corpse on the floor, she understood. It was the most brutally honest statement about surviving in this world. Suemo crouched and began rummaging through Brother Long's pockets. A few pieces of chocolate, a pack of compressed biscuits, a lighter. Not much, which also meant there had to be a base nearby. A phone in Brother Long's pocket lit up just as Suemo was straightening up. The screen illuminated the floor as it slid from the corpse's pocket, displaying a WeChat notification. The sender's name read, Coward Chunyu. Suemo picked up the phone and unlocked it. Messages appeared in a single, damning line. Asterisk, Brother Long. Did you find my fiancée Lin Yao yet? Asterisk. Asterisk, so, is she a virgin or not? Asterisk. Asterisk, we're waiting at the back gate. Handle it quick. Asterisk. Asterisk, when you're done, let me and the guys have a turn too. Asterisk. Lin Yao stood frozen, staring. That voice, that name, that contact. She knew him. She knew him all too well. Chunyu, her supposed fiancé. The man who once entered her life with an air of respectability, back when the world still made sense. That your man? Suemo asked, holding up the phone. My fiancé. Lin Yao spat the two words through gritted teeth, enunciating each syllable. Sumo's eyes flicked over her, sharp and appraising, but he said nothing. I'm clean, Lin Yao continued, her back straightening and her voice steady. She wasn't asking for pity, nor was she explaining herself. She just needed him to know the truth. Not out of shame, but because in this world, there wasn't much she could claim as her own. This was one thing no one had taken from her. Suemo pocketed the phone, still silent. Lin Yao slung the medical supply-filled backpack over her shoulder and bent down to drag a heavy suitcase beside her. It was bulky, nearly bursting at the seams with medical equipment. A few changes of clothes took up only one corner. She struggled with its weight, but she didn't ask for help. Suemo glanced at her. Outside, toward the direction of the back gate, someone was still waiting for news. When Suemo grabbed the suitcase with one hand, his face shifted slightly. Not because it was too heavy, but because it was heavier than he expected. On the first day of the apocalypse, he'd seen people dragging enormous bags filled with useless crap, clothes, makeup, power banks, snacks, even someone lugging around a tablet. He didn't judge them. It was human nature. But in a car with limited space, every kilogram had to earn its worth. He remembered one woman he'd traveled with in the early days. Her impractical packing had nearly gotten them both killed. He had planned to toss this suitcase to the curb, but the weight was different. Sensing his brief hesitation, Lin Yao spoke up quickly, her tone firm. Suemo, it's full of medical books, notes, anatomy charts. I promise, I'm not taking up space for nothing. Suemo didn't respond immediately. He hefted the bag again, testing its weight. Medical books. On the first day of the apocalypse, this woman had packed medical books. He looked at her again. Standing in the dim, blood-soaked corridor, her face pale, her exhaustion undeniable. But she wasn't crying, wasn't breaking down, wasn't clinging to him in fear. She just stood there, stubbornly waiting for him to pass judgment. Stay close to me, Suemo said shortly. With the suitcase in one hand and the blade in his other, he turned and walked out. Lin Yao followed without hesitation, her steps quick and steady. The body lay crumpled in the stairwell behind them. The modifications greatly slowed the vehicle's speed and mobility. It wasn't long before the pursuing zombies began closing the distance again. Hold on, Suemo said, voice steady amidst the chaos. Lin Yao barely had time to grab the handle as Suemo yanked the steering wheel. The van swerved sharply, tires screeching against the cracked asphalt. A group of zombies that had been about to latch onto the vehicle was sent tumbling instead, their twisted forms smashing into each other in a grotesque pile. He maneuvered the van with a precision that defied the vehicle's outward appearance. It wasn't a sleek SUV, Nor did it have the allure of speed or modernity, but every move Su-mo made with it felt calculated, deliberate. This wasn't just driving, it was survival in motion. Lin Yao's heart was pounding. She wasn't sure if it was fear, adrenaline, or the sheer reality of what her life had become in the span of a few hours. The further they got away from the chaos, the more the sounds of scratching and guttural growls faded. Her breathing steadied. For now, they were safe, or as safe as anyone could be in a world like this. As Su-mo drove, his eyes continuously scanned their surroundings. Every turn of the van was intentional, every stop calculated. The man had the kind of composure that came from having been in dire situations too many times to count. Whatever his past, it had shaped him into someone who wasted no movements, no decisions, and no explanations unless absolutely necessary. Lin Yao glanced at his profile, trying to make sense of him. He hadn't sugar-coated their deal, a man devoid of unnecessary illusions. His bluntness wasn't comforting, but it was honest, which was more than she could say for most people she'd encountered since the world fell apart. Finally, she couldn't hold back her curiosity any longer. "That SUV," she started, her voice subdued but tinged with confusion. "Why draw them away like that? You could have just led them somewhere else." Su-mo didn't look at her. "Eyes still on the road." "Decisions, Lin Yao. In this world, you don't always get the luxury of doing things cleanly. Sometimes, sacrifices have to be made for something greater." Her lips pressed together as she absorbed his words. It wasn't that she disagreed, it was just difficult. Letting go of what felt familiar, reliable. The SUV had been her last connection to the convenience of her old life. A life where she never had to question what was safe, what was fair, or what survival truly meant. But deep down, Lin Yao knew that Su-mo had made the right call. Her SUV, pristine as it was, would have been nothing compared to the reinforced tank of a van they were riding in now. She might have been proud of its engine, of its high ground clearance, but it wouldn't have lasted a day against that swarm. "Does it get easier?" she asked after a moment, her voice softer, almost a whisper. Su-mo finally glanced at her, just a brief second before he focused back on the road. "No." But the questions stopped matching. The weight of those words hit her like a punch. But instead of drowning in despair, she found herself grounding in his calm, methodical tone. This man, whether she liked it or not, was her best shot at staying alive. He had no room for sentiment, no space for regret. And if she wanted to survive, really survive, then she'd have to learn to do the same. The van rolled to a stop in front of what looked like an abandoned industrial warehouse. Without a word, Su-mo exited, grabbing his weapon from the seat beside him. Lin Yao followed, her movements wooden, her thoughts still tangled. As she stepped outside into the muted twilight, she felt the crumbling world press against her chest again, suffocating as much as it was liberating. Beside her, Sumo's silent focus was unwavering as he scanned their surroundings. "Stay close," he said simply, already walking toward the warehouse entrance. Lin Yao tightened her grip on the makeshift weapon she carried, a weathered steel pipe she'd picked up hours earlier. It wasn't much, but it was enough to feel like she wasn't completely helpless. For now, she reminded herself, survival had no room for hesitation. And as they stepped into the shadows of the looming structure ahead, Lin Yao realized that this, too, was her new reality. A world where trust was rare, sacrifices were constant, and people like Su-mo were the only thing standing between her and certain death. A plan. The fuel consumption skyrocketed. This vehicle, once hailed as the ultimate economical and reliable choice for the masses, started showing its weakness when faced with slightly steeper slopes or deeper potholes. More than a few times, Su-mo had to rely on his precise control to force the car through, not because the car was capable, but because he made up for its shortcomings with skill. Not enough power. "The engine needs upgrading first," Su-mo murmured under his breath, not addressing anyone in particular. Lin Yao had already fallen asleep, leaning against the car window. After a sleepless night with nerves stretched to their limits, the sudden wave of safety lulled her into slumber. Su-mo glanced at her without a word and kept his eyes focused on the road. By twilight, Su-mo gently nudged her awake. The West City Auto Repair Shop. Remote location, fewer zombies, solid factory structure, and the gates were still shut. Su-mo explained briefly. On the day the outbreak happened, it was just him and old Wang on shift. He managed to escape, so the place should be clean. Lin Yao rubbed her eyes, took a look outside, and nodded. But Suemo wasn't just looking for a safe place to rest. The skeletons of scrapped vehicles, mountains of discarded parts, and metal scraps littering the ground inside the factory. To him, these weren't just junk. They were a treasure trove of resources. His natural ability, heart of the fortress, thrived on these materials. Before getting out of the car, he laid out strict rules. Stay inside, lock the doors, and under no circumstances open them. Lin Yao asked, "What if it's you calling for me?" Suemo replied simply, "I'll open it myself." She thought back to how he had previously unlocked the car door with mere thought and didn't press further. But she didn't want to just sit and wait. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Suemo paused, his hand on the door, then turned back to look at her and assigned her a task. Monitor the Survivor Forum starting now. Keep track of all intelligence in the Star City area, including the movement of red fog, major strongholds, newly emerged powerful monsters, and gifted individuals, resource points, and dangerous zones. He handed her a fully charged, large-capacity power bank, adding, "Use it sparingly." Lin Yao pulled a hard-shell notebook from her pocket, and her spirits lifted instantly. This was something she could do. Suemo didn't say anything more. He stepped out, closed the car door behind him with a soft click. Lin Yao looked down, opened her notebook, and tapped her phone screen. Outside, Suemo was already walking toward the repair shop, his figure fading into the dusk. That pile of metal was waiting for him. And the engine issue? That needed to be addressed tonight. The moment the phone screen lit up, Lin Yao's fingers froze midair. Not because of some alarming message, but because of a name. Chinyu. The profile picture showed a man in a suit, seeming friendly with a polished smile. The message included just 5 words. "Yao Yao, are you there?" She stared at the text for about 3 seconds. Then she swiped it away. No hesitation, no reply, not even a screenshot. That man probably didn't know she was still alive, or maybe he did, and this was a test. Either way, she wasn't going to waste a single second guessing his motives. The apocalypse was filthy enough without letting people like him make it worse. At least zombies didn't pretend to be anything else. She refocused on the forum. Sumo's first task for her was to gather intel on nearby survivors. It sounded simple enough, but every line of text on the forum felt like a knife cutting into her nerves. The red fog kept shrinking inward. The western and northern zones were advancing at a rate of 1.5 kilometers per day, and the latest alerts urged all survivors to evacuate southeast. In the eastern zone, the old chemical plant site had become home to a new variant dubbed Stalker, fast, capable of climbing walls, active at night. 3 teams had already been wiped out there. But the most chilling update was about a southern squad called Black Scorpion. They were ambushed during a supply run and completely wiped out. Their attackers allegedly included someone with a mind control ability. Humans killing humans, far more efficient than zombies ever could be. Lin Yao forced herself not to dwell on the brutality. Her focus was on organizing, categorizing, marking locations, and creating a format Suemo could immediately use. She knew this was all she could contribute for now, and she had to do it well. At the repair shop, Suemo walked with confidence. This place was ingrained in his memory. He knew where each car was parked, where the parts were stored, and even which floorboards creaked underfoot. He could navigate the entire space blindfolded. Before the apocalypse, he had spent 6 months working here, repairing cars. Who would have thought those months would turn out to be his most valuable training for survival today? He stepped around an overturned car lift and found what he was looking for by the storeroom entrance. Old Wong was still bent over, examining a car chassis in the same position as if frozen in time. A wrench was clutched in his hand, his skin a lifeless gray, hair sparse and white, and half his face had already rotted away. In life, this quiet mentor had taught Sumo plenty, with few words but solid skills and a stubbornness that matched the engines he worked on. Sumo didn't linger. His right fist gleamed with a metallic sheen as it launched forward. A dull thud echoed, clean and sharp. Before the wrench could hit the ground, he caught it, tested its weight, and slipped it into the tool belt at his waist. In the apocalypse, a sturdy blunt weapon was often more reliable than a knife. The cleanup took less than an hour. The office, break room, tool shed, parts storeroom, even the maintenance platform near the ceiling. He cleared them all. A few low-level zombies trapped in corners were dealt with along the way. By the end, the repair shop was clean. Then, the scavenging began. Car batteries were the top priority. The van was still running low on power. The parts depot had a few unopened ones, so he chose 3. Tools were packed to the brim. Wrenches, sockets, pliers, hammers, plus wires, fuses, lubricants, and zip ties. These seemingly insignificant things could become lifesavers in a vehicle emergency. Spark plugs, high-voltage wires, engine oil, antifreeze. Anything he could take, he did. Every action was deliberate and efficient, with not a single wasted movement. He knew exactly what else could still be extracted from this place. The outcome, he would die. Sumo, panting heavily, his palms sweating, had to come up with a final plan. Extreme fatigue and tension kept his mind racing. He glanced around, his eyes rapidly scanning the factory, searching for any possible opportunity. Suddenly, his eyes landed on a row of high-pressure oxyacetylene welding tanks against the wall. Take a gamble, he cursed under his breath, mocking his own mad decision. He moved quickly, forcing himself to ignore the intense chest tightness and dizziness, focusing only on how to execute the plan precisely. The cleaner chief was struggling. Its broken tail had loosened slightly, and its ferocious roars made the air in the factory feel heavy. Its gaze seemed to follow Sumo's every move. Each twist added to the pressure on Sumo's chest. Sumo picked up the welding tanks and threw one of the smaller ones towards the cleaner. However, he wasn't going to attack it directly. He could see further. The cleaner's roar drew it in, causing it to twist its body even more violently. Though its tail was trapped under the car, the power of its forelimbs surged even more fiercely towards the direction Sumo had thrown the canister. This was precisely Sumo's intention. He quickly grabbed a long tube lying beside the workbench, connected one end to the outlet of the oxy-fuel welding canister, and aimed the other end towards the cleaner. With all his might, he turned the switch, watching as white, high-pressure oxygen gushed out, filling the air. The cleaner sensed something was wrong. It howled and twisted even more frantically, desperately trying to break free from under the car. However, Sumo had already grabbed the spare lighter, standing at a safe distance, staring at the area filled with oxygen. "If it doesn't blow you up, it'll burn you to ashes," he muttered to himself. The moment the lighter ignited, he tossed it towards the canister opening without hesitation. The result was almost a foregone conclusion. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, boom! A massive explosion erupted within the factory, instantly engulfing the cleaner leader and everything around it. The heat wave from the flames hit him, forcing Sumo to struggle to maintain his balance. When the smoke cleared, the factory was charred black. The cleaner leader's massive form was no longer a complete outline. Only its charred remains scattered on the ground. Sumo knelt on the ground, feeling every bone in his body protesting his overuse. "It was worth it," he murmured, a weary smile playing on his lips. He was alive. That alone was enough. However, his gaze remained unwavering. He dragged his exhausted body to his feet and looked out of the factory. The night was deep, the moonlight cold, but he knew that one person's survival was just the tip of the iceberg. More threats, more choices lay ahead. But now he needed to live. He had to live. The ending. By his feet lay a lead-acid battery, and in his tool bag was a length of thick copper wire. He crouched down, holding the battery in his left hand. With his right, he fastened the two ends of the copper wire tightly to the positive and negative terminals. A thin wisp of smoke curled up from the connection, and the battery began to heat up. At that moment, the scavenger leader, bloodied and with half its lower body gone, made one last desperate lunge at him. Its grotesque maw opened wide, like it intended to swallow the man whole. Sumo stood his ground. He didn't move. When that gaping, monstrous mouth was just half a step away, he shoved the smoking battery straight into its throat. "Try this on for size," he snarled. Blue sparks exploded inside the creature's mouth, blinding and violent. A muffled pop came from deep inside the battery as it expanded. The moment hundreds of scavengers erupted from all directions, Sumo couldn't even lift a finger. That electric shock to the leader had drained the very last bit of strength from him. He collapsed onto the ground, panting heavily, his vision clouding with black spots. Each breath was sheer agony. From every dim corner of the repair shop, drawn by the leader's horrified screeches, the regular scavengers swarmed forward, their eyeless heads all locked onto him in unison. It was a sight so dreadful that no sane person could look at it without succumbing to despair. And then the unimaginable happened. About 30 feet away, the swarm of scavengers suddenly stopped. It wasn't because of him. They weren't afraid of him. It was the leader's corpse. The burned, smoldering body gave off a stench and some sort of signal that their primitive instincts couldn't decipher. The overwhelming numbers meant nothing. This invisible force held the swarm at bay, freezing them at the 30-foot mark. Restless, they clawed at the ground in frustration, but none dared come closer. This window wouldn't stay open for long. Suemo didn't have the luxury to wonder why. Only one thought occupied his mind: get back to the car. Bit by bit, he forced himself upright and began his slow, painstaking crawl toward the door. Outside, Lin Yao was close to losing it. She sat in the car, her heart pounding. The ear-splitting screech from the repair shop just moments ago still echoed in her ears. She stared intently at the shutter door through the windshield, but all she could see was silence and smoke. No movement, no news. A sick knot of fear formed in her stomach as her thoughts spiraled into worst-case scenarios. She was on the verge of panic when the door creaked and was pushed open from the inside. Out stumbled Suemo, his right sleeve ripped to shreds, his arm black and blue, trailed by billowing smoke. His movements were unsteady, and every faltering step looked like it might be his last. Behind him, scavengers were already beginning to pour out through the gap in the door. Lin Yao's hand instinctively moved toward the switch to unlock the car door. Her mind replayed his parting words before he got out of the car. No matter what you see or hear, don't open the door. As long as the door stays closed, you're safe. She'd even challenged him at the time, asking, "What if it's you?" His response had been calm and unwavering. "I can open it myself." But now he was barely holding himself up, and the nearest scavengers were less than 15 feet behind him. Opening the door would mean disobeying him, but keeping it shut meant watching him get torn apart. Lin Yao made a third choice. She slammed her hand down on the car horn. It wasn't opening the door. The sudden blare froze the leading scavengers mid-charge. For a second, they hesitated as a group, stunned by the noise. That fleeting 1 or 2 second pause was all Suemo needed. Whispering a silent mantra in his head, "Fortress of Will," he heard the click of the driver's side door unlocking. Practically throwing himself into the car, he collapsed into the driver's seat. The sharp pain of his back striking the chair made his vision go white. The scavengers recovered and began surging forward again. Lin Yao gripped Suemo by the shoulders and collar with all her strength, planting her feet against the passenger seat for leverage. Her slight, delicate frame suddenly radiated an almost superhuman force. Blue veins bulged on her forehead as she dragged him inch by inch further into the car. The very moment Sumo's feet left the ground, the sound of the car's locks engaging was the last thing Suemo managed to accomplish before his mind went blank. He slumped sideways in the driver's seat, completely unconscious. Outside, scavengers pounded against the car's doors and windows, their impacts rocking the vehicle. But it didn't matter, they were locked out. Lin Yao barely had time to catch her breath before she lunged forward. When her fingers touched the faint pulse in his neck, relief washed over her. He was alive, barely but alive. Her brief flood of relief was immediately replaced by dread. High fever, extreme physical exhaustion, and possibly mild poisoning. Gritting her teeth, she forced herself to flick into doctor mode and pushed her emotions aside. This was her battlefield now. She retrieved an emergency kit from the back seat, a small, hard-shell box she'd prepared before the apocalypse. Its contents were modest: antiseptic iodine, gauze, bandages, a needle and thread for stitching wounds, and a few precious antibiotic pills. Hardly much, but a luxury in this new world. Once she opened Sumo's coat, the true extent of his injuries became clear. His right arm was swollen and purple, the soft tissues heavily bruised, with a deep open cut on the inside of his elbow. What he had endured in that repair shop in the last 2 hours, Lin Yao didn't dare imagine. There was no anesthetic. Using tweezers, she carefully swabbed the wound's edges with iodine-soaked cotton, removing dirt and debris bit by excruciating bit. Then she picked up the needle and thread, taking a deep, steadying breath before beginning to stitch. Just hang in there. It'll be over soon, she murmured, not sure if she was trying to comfort the unconscious Suemo or steady her own trembling hands. Once the wound was closed, the fever remained. The fever medicine needed to be taken with water, but he was still unconscious. If she tried to make him swallow it, he'd only choke. Lin Yao stared long and hard at the bottle of water, finally unscrewing the cap. She took a sip, wetting her throat, then took a large mouthful. As she leaned down, their faces were suddenly closer than she had anticipated. Her heartbeat sped up uncontrollably, and her face felt hot. "Stay calm. You're a doctor," she told herself firmly. With one hand, she gently opened his jaw and held his head steady, carefully transferring the water and dissolved pill from her mouth to his. It was only once she straightened up and exhaled that she felt she could breathe again. What followed was a blur of tedious, methodical tasks, wiping his fevered chest and back with a damp cloth, one pass after another, trying to lower his temperature. Suemo, still unconscious, furrowed his brows in his sleep. A slight release. Her breathing gradually became steady. Her body temperature seemed to have dropped just a bit. Lin Yao leaned back against the car seat, turning her head to look at his sleeping profile. A mix of emotions churned in her chest, too tangled to put into words. This man was cold, intense, and domineering. He had saved her, yes, but also asserted some kind of unspoken claim over her. And yet, just moments ago, she had done something so intimate, that she had never shared with her supposed fiancé, Chen Yu. "Lin Yao, you really are," she murmured under her breath, her voice tinged with confusion and self-mockery, though the thought remained unfinished. The sound of scratching outside the car persisted, but Sumo's breathing had evened out. A strange sense of calm began to replace the suffocating fear that had gripped her earlier. She couldn't quite define it. Was it trust? Dependence? Or something else entirely? All she knew was that in this moment, sitting here next to him felt far safer than being awake and alone. Curled up in the passenger seat, she hugged her knees tightly to her chest, her eyes darting cautiously to the windows outside. She forced herself to stay alert, refusing to succumb to sleep. Unbeknownst to her, Suemo had already woken up. When Lin Yao gave him the medicine, his consciousness had returned. He simply lay there, unmoving, letting her treat his wound, feeling the cool liquid flow down his throat in small, deliberate doses. He also felt the soft brush of fabric against his skin as she tended to him. He never intended to let her know he was awake. Instead, he simply watched. It wasn't until Lin Yao could no longer keep her eyes open and her head began to nod forward that Suemo shifted his gaze. He looked at his neatly bandaged right arm, at the first aid kit now tucked away at her feet, and at the half-empty bottle of water. This woman had turned out to be more cooperative and more resourceful than he had anticipated. But he had no time to dwell on that now. He tried to sit up, but the muscles in his right arm immediately screamed in protest, sending a wave of searing pain through him. Sweat broke out on his forehead as he stifled a groan, bracing himself on the seat as he slowly straightened his body. Outside the car, a blood-red moon hung in the night sky, casting a dark crimson hue over the ground below. The danger hadn't passed. He needed to keep watch. And more importantly, he needed to make the most of this time to get things done. His eyes flicked to the numbers displayed on the fortress core, 722 points. This was the capital he had nearly died to obtain. Suemo reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a piece of leather he had retrieved from the scavenger leader. Even in the dim light, the leather glimmered faintly with prismatic hues. It was cool to the touch and had a strange, slick texture, as though something alive resided within it. The fortress core provided a brief description: mimicry leather, elite grade. When integrated into armor, it grants the vehicle environmental mimicry, significantly reducing the chance of detection by zombies and mutated creatures. Cost: 100 points. Suemo didn't hesitate. Some people believe that defense should always come first, that the thicker the armor, the better. But Suemo understood one fundamental truth. It was far more valuable to avoid being seen in the first place than to withstand an attack. Especially at night, especially during times when you had to park, lurk, and wait. A heavily armored vehicle surrounded by 50 zombies was only a matter of time, no matter how strong its steel plating. Fortress Core, integrate mimicry leather. Begin special modification. The energy ripple was almost imperceptible, but Suemo felt a subtle change in the vehicle's structure. The matte gray surface of the van shimmered faintly, like ripples on water. Prismatic light flowed across the body momentarily before vanishing. The van still looked like the same old vehicle, but it now seemed to blend seamlessly with the surrounding shadows and ruins. 10 minutes later, the modification was complete. Environmental mimicry, level 1. While stationary or moving at low speeds, the probability of being detected was reduced by 50%. Remaining fortress points, 622. Suemo turned his attention to the second piece of loot, a fragment of dark red metal pried from the oil gun zombie. Its surface was etched with flame-like patterns, and it radiated a faint heat when held. The fortress core provided two parallel upgrade options: engine enhancement to increase power and torque at the cost of higher fuel consumption, costing 300 points, or a special modification using flame iron shard to improve combustion efficiency, increasing power while reducing fuel consumption, also costing 300 points. Both options combined would cost 600 points. Suemo did the mental math and paused for a moment. If he spent 600 points, he'd only have 22 left. With the added armor weight, the van's current engine was already struggling. Upgrading it was essential for survival in this brutal world, but the price would mean staking nearly everything. In the end, he whispered the command. This time, the reaction was anything but subtle. The entire vehicle began to quiver softly as a low hum resonated from beneath the hood, as though some inner mechanism was being reshaped. Lin Yao remained asleep in the passenger seat, oblivious to the transformation happening around her. Suemo sat vigilantly, keeping an eye on the car and the woman inside it throughout the process. The modification wasn't quick. It would take 60 more minutes. As dawn approached, Suemo closed the hood. The long night of waiting resulted in an upgrade notice from the system. The engine had gone from AV4 to AV6, with torque and horsepower each increasing by 50%. Fuel consumption had stayed the same. Most importantly, there was now an additional passive trait, flame affinity. What did this mean? In an apocalypse, pure fuel was a rare commodity. Most of the time, you'd have to make do with low-quality fuel laden with impurities and corrosive properties. Standard engines wouldn't last under such conditions. But with flame affinity, even the dirtiest fuel could be consumed without issue. This van was now a one-of-a-kind supreme survival vehicle in Star City, an unparalleled V6. Suemo didn't hit the road immediately. He circled the van, confirming that the environmental mimicry feature was still active. The car's outline melded with its surroundings, making it practically invisible amidst the shadows and rubble. Remembering the supplies he had left behind during their hasty retreat from the auto shop, he fought through the pain in his right arm and went back to retrieve the stash. Battery packs, tools, spare parts. He carried them back to the van load by load. When he brought in the final box, the passenger side window rolled down. Off-road vehicle roared into view, tires kicking up dirt and gravel as it barreled down the narrow street. It was quickly followed by two more vehicles, both similarly armored with makeshift metal plates and spray-painted symbols that looked like a gang insignia. The atmosphere in the back alley shifted from tense silence to palpable danger in an instant. Lin Yao's grip on her phone tightened. Her first instinct was to call Suemo, but she stopped herself. If he was still inside clearing the clinic, a sudden call could distract him or give away his position. Instead, she swiftly crouched behind one of the broken bikes, her heart pounding so loudly she could feel it in her ears. The vehicles came to a screeching halt just outside the clinic's alleyway. Men jumped out, armed with a mix of rifles, machetes, and improvised weapons. They weren't survivors simply passing through. They were scavengers, and from the look of it, the aggressive kind. Their loud voices echoed down the alleyway, arguing over whether to raid the clinic or scout elsewhere. Lin Yao strained to listen, catching fragmented phrases. Supplies should still be here. No one's come through this area in days. And keep an eye out for traps. Her breath caught as one of the men began walking into the alley, his machete dragging lazily against the ground, producing an eerie metallic scraping sound. Suemo hadn't been wrong. In this world, every step was a calculated risk. Big hospitals, major shelters, even places like this modest clinic. None of them were truly safe anymore. They always attracted someone, or something. Lin Yao's mind raced. What would happen if she was discovered? She wasn't a fighter, not like Suemo. Her hands were more accustomed to scalpels than weapons. And yet, she couldn't stay frozen. She needed to think. She looked over to the van. Their supplies, meager but essential, were still inside. If these scavengers found it, they'd strip it bare or worse, take the vehicle entirely. It was their lifeline. Her gaze flitted to the clinic's back door, still ajar from when Suemo had disappeared inside. He didn't know these men were here yet. She needed to warn him. Steeling herself, Lin Yao began to move, staying low and keeping her footsteps impossibly silent. She edged closer to the clinic wall, her heart hammering louder than the muffled engines of the scavengers' trucks. Every sound felt amplified, the crunch of gravel under her shoes, the occasional clink of her medical bag brushing against her leg. But the men were just far enough away that they didn't notice her, yet. Suddenly, she heard a faint rustling from within the clinic, then a soft but deliberate tapping sound. It was a rhythm, almost like a code. She froze, her eyes widening. Sumo's signal. One they'd established the night before during a casual discussion of just-in-case scenarios. 2 taps for safe. 3 was danger, and repeated rapid taps meant status critical. What she heard now, 3 slow, sure taps, sent cold chills through her veins. He knew they weren't alone anymore. Lin Yao pressed her back against the clinic's brick wall, positioning herself near the door. Her free hand hovered near the small set of surgical tools she always carried. They weren't weapons in the traditional sense, but they were sharp. If it came to it, and she fervently hoped it wouldn't, she could defend herself long enough for Suemo to intervene. The scavengers grew louder. One of them shouted from farther down the alley, "Hey, I think someone's been here recently. Check the clinic." This was it. They were about to notice the back door, or worse, the van. Lin Yao bit her lip, adrenaline roaring through her veins as another tapping sound reached her ears, this time louder. She looked through the crack in the door and caught a brief glimpse of Sumo's silhouette. His dark eyes locked onto hers, his expression calm but unmistakably serious. He held up one finger. Wait, it meant. Even in the chaos of the moment, Lin Yao trusted him. Suemo wasn't the kind of person to act on impulse. He always had a plan. But as the scavengers edged closer, the gap for action was quickly closing. The man with the machete turned his head toward the van, his eyes narrowing sharply. "Search it," he barked to one of his companions, raising his weapon as if expecting someone, or something, to burst out at any moment. Before Lin Yao could decide whether to warn them off with a bluff or simply stay hidden, there was a sound from the clinic. Not taps this time, but the unmistakable noise of something heavy crashing to the ground. The scavengers instantly whipped their heads toward the noise. Without hesitation, 2 of them ran straight for the back door, while the rest kept their weapons trained on the alley. Lin Yao's fists clenched, her pulse drum-like against her temple. Suemo had intentionally made the noise. He was drawing them inside. The black Land Rover came to a screeching halt, blocking the narrow alleyway entirely and sealing off the only exit. The car door swung open in quick succession, and out stepped 5 men. Leading the group was a towering, bald brute nearly 6'3", wearing an open leather jacket and wielding a machete smeared with fresh blood. Behind him was a wiry man with glasses, 2 burly men in security uniforms armed with steel pipes, and a slim, monkeyish driver grinning servilely. Without hesitation, the group swiftly dispatched the few zombies lingering near the car, their movements sharp and practiced, showing they clearly knew what they were doing. "Boss Biao, it's here. Sunshine Clinic." The coordinates Li Xiao gave us were spot on. The monkey-faced driver sidled up to the bald man. "This place is out of the main search area. No one's been through it yet. It must still have medicine." Lin Yao sat frozen in her van, clutching her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. Suemo was still inside the clinic. She was outside, and the van was completely boxed in. These men clearly weren't here for friendly directions. They had blades and pipes, and their demeanor screamed trouble. Already, the group had begun walking toward the clinic's back entrance. Lin Yao huddled in the front passenger seat of the van, engine off, a narrow slit left in the window. The street outside was a lethal no man's land in this post-apocalyptic chaos. She knew she couldn't afford to make a wrong move. All she could do was wait. But waiting, sometimes, was even more dangerous than taking action. Zhang Biao and his gang had come here for the clinic. Zhang Biao, the leader of the Black Tiger gang, was a D-level ability user. His talent was strength-based, which made him one of the most feared figures in the area. His goal was straightforward: loot supplies and eliminate anyone who got in the way. To him, the clinic's metal shutters were just a minor appetizer before the main event. Before they could do anything, however, the monkey-faced man suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. This guy had an F-level vision ability. His eyesight within 30 meters was sharper than a telescope's. A casual glance toward the backyard caused him to freeze in place, his eyes bulging like they'd seen a ghost. He had spotted Lin Yao. At first, Zhang Biao didn't think much of it. In the post-apocalyptic world, desperate people running for their lives were a dime a dozen. But the dazed, almost unnerved expression on Monkey's face made him follow the man's gaze. What he saw made his Adam's apple bob involuntarily, silencing whatever words he'd been about to say. The three men crammed together in the narrow alley, peering through the backyard. From this distance, they could see the girl sitting in the van, exhausted and tense, yet heartbreakingly clean in a world mired in filth and despair. Zhang Biao's usual loud-mouthed arrogance softened into what he considered an affable knock. Thump, thump, thump. The machete's hilt collided with the hood of the van, the sound far more aggressive than he likely intended. "Hey girl, come on out. Don't worry. Your big bro here means no harm," he said, jerking his thumb arrogantly toward the Land Rover behind him, his tone full of the swaggering confidence of a local gangster showing off his wealth. "Check it out, top-of-the-line Range Rover, V8 engine. Stick with me, and you'll never have to ride in this beat-up van again." Lin Yao sat still inside the van, the man's words twisting her stomach in disgust. She knew how she needed to respond. Panic, tears, begging. All of those reactions would only make things spiral out of control faster in a situation like this. She forced a deep breath, steadying her voice as she opened her mouth. Just 4 words. "Your car is trash." The words weren't hers originally. They were something Sue Mo had said when critiquing her off-road vehicle just days ago. She'd been furious then, but now she was returning those words verbatim, though the target of her sarcasm had changed. There was silence outside the van for a full 2 seconds. Then Monkey erupted first, his voice trembling with rage. "Are you blind? This is a damn Range Rover, top of the line." Zhang Biao said nothing, but his expression had shifted from "I'm here to play nice" to something much darker, a look that, in this apocalyptic world, usually meant things were about to get ugly. Lin Yao watched his twisting face through the window, her fingers quietly tightening around her phone. Suemo still wasn't back. The Range Rover, weighing more than 3 tons, revved its engine. Zhang Biao floored the gas pedal, aiming the SUV straight at the van. To him, this wasn't just a collision, it was a death sentence. When the dust settled, he was still grinning, but the smile felt paper-thin, evanescent. The van had been shoved against the courtyard's brick wall, its body shifted half a meter to the side, but that was all. No shattered glass, no dented roof. Not even the curve of the windows had changed. The Land Rover, however, its hood was mangled, its entire front end crumpled like paper. The bumper had flown off, and coolant and motor oil leaked out in a dark, viscous mess. Every single airbag had deployed, leaving Monkey partially crushed, his face swollen and red. He crawled out of the driver's seat, pointing at the van with a trembling hand, his voice cracking as he screamed. "Boss Biao, that van, is it freaking solid steel?" Zhang Biao didn't reply directly. Instead, he grabbed his machete and stalked over to the van's driver's side window. Raising the blade high, he brought it down with all his might. A sharp clang echoed in the air. The blade bounced back, not leaving so much as a scratch on the glass. The impact sent a jolt up Zhang Biao's arm, numbing his hand and nearly making him drop the machete. He kicked the door in frustration. The result? The van didn't even budge. Meanwhile, the force of the kick sent him stumbling backward. Inside, Lin Yao was still trembling, not from fear, but from the lingering jolt of impact when the safety harness had slammed her back into the seat. Her hands, however, had already finished typing out a message on her phone. She hit send. Glasses, the wiry man, had been silently observing from the sidelines and caught the movement. He leaned close to Zhang Biao, his voice low and urgent. Boss, she just sent a message. There might be someone inside. Zhang Biao's expression shifted instantly. He turned his head toward the clinic's darkened entrance and signaled to Monkey. The latter, still clutching his swollen face, rummaged through the Land Rover's trunk to retrieve a sawed-off shotgun. Monkey, joined by two of the pipe-wielding brawlers, A Chong and A Yong, exchanged terse looks before marching into the clinic, their figures swallowed by the darkness. Zhang Biao stayed where he was, his gaze fixed on Lin Yao in the van. His voice, unervingly calm, grew colder with every word. Little girl, you'd better pray your friend in there is as tough as nails. Because once my boys drag him out and deal with him in front of you. He trailed off sinisterly. This apocalypse, man, I've never had a chance to play with a chick this fine before. The clinic was pitch black inside. 3 men entered. One of them was holding a gun. As for the message Lin Yao had sent out, no one knew if anyone had seen it. The message was simple. 5 men, Range Rover, leader's name is Biao. Claims to be a Class D talent user. Arm. Suemo stuffed his phone back into his pocket without replying. The crashing sounds from the backyard continued, but he didn't head in that direction. Instead, he turned and walked towards the deepest part of the clinic's hallway. He could hear their footsteps, 3 of them, moving without trying to conceal their noise, accompanied by crude cursing. One of them was walking in front, his steps deliberately steady, not because he was braver, but because he could see clearly. That was the real problem. Class F talent. Enhanced vision. It was like a living night vision scope. This hallway, which was shrouded in darkness and concealment for Suemo, was clear and open for the man nicknamed Skinny Monkey. Hiding wasn't an option. Dodging wasn't feasible either. There just wasn't enough space. He had to deal with him first and make sure he didn't get the chance to fire a shot. Pressing his back against the wall at the corner, Suemo controlled his breathing, keeping it shallow. He waited. Their voices grew closer. Skinny Monkey was rambling about his gun, his special eyes, and how no matter where the kid was hiding, it wouldn't work. He sounded relaxed because he had scanned the whole hallway and saw nothing significant. What he didn't expect was someone standing just at the outer edge of his visible range. As soon as the muzzle of his gun peeked around the corner, Sumo's right hand closed around it. His enhanced, metallicized palm clamped down, blocking the barrel completely. Skinny Monkey's instincts responded swiftly. He pulled the trigger. He did, but the shotgun's shell couldn't exit. The gunpowder, trapped in a sealed chamber, had nowhere to go. The pressure built within a fraction of a second to its breaking point, and the makeshift barrel exploded. The sound was deafening in the narrow hallway, like a suppressed clap of thunder. Skinny Monkey's hands were shredded, shards of metal embedded in his face. He staggered backward, hitting the wall, then slumped to the floor, unmoving. It happened so fast that the 2 men behind him barely had time to process what had occurred. Ah Chong reacted a split second faster, swinging down a steel pipe. Suemo swept his left-handed dagger across Chong's wrist in the same moment, severing the artery. His right hand seized the man's throat, and with a muted crunch, Ah Chong collapsed to the ground. Ah Yong, startled to the core, snapped out of his shock only to find Ah Chong's lifeless body and Sumo's unflinching gaze staring him down. In sheer desperation, Ah Yong swung down with all his strength. The steel pipe clashed against Sumo's metallicized arm, the impact splitting the skin of his palm, leaving both hands nearly powerless. Yet the pipe, it didn't fall. It was as if Sumo's hand had welded itself to the steel effortlessly. The hallway fell into silence. 3 men had entered. 3 men now lay on the floor. It had taken less than 3 minutes. There were still 2 men in the backyard, including Biao, the self-proclaimed Class D talent user. A wide gap separated Class D from Class F, an entire 2 ranks. Suemo released the steel pipe and glanced at his hand, then began heading towards the backyard. When the threaded steel pipe struck, Ah Yong genuinely thought it'd be over. Instead, the pipe collided with Sumo's forearm like hitting an iron wall. It didn't budge. Then, before his very eyes, he saw the solid steel melt away bit by bit in Sumo's fingers, vanishing completely in 4 or 5 seconds. Ah Yong's legs gave out beneath him, but he didn't get the chance to run. From the moment Suemo had blocked the gun barrel to the point where 3 men lay motionless on the ground, the entire fight lasted fewer than 10 seconds. Standing above the 3 lifeless bodies, Suemo cast a quick glance and flicked the blood off his arm, immediately beginning the countdown in his mind. There were still two left outside. One was Zhang Biao, the talent user, the other his glasses-wearing strategist, a calmer threat. These two were no amateurs, unlike the three grunts he just dealt with. Worse, they'd likely figure out something was amiss at any moment. Time wasn't on his side. Still, Suemo didn't rush out straight away. He crouched and pressed his hand against the destroyed homemade shotgun, and the steel pipe remains. He was still short over 200 points of proficiency to upgrade Steel Fortress to level 3. After fighting for days, he had learned this undeniable truth. The enhancement of just one arm wasn't nearly enough to confront a real talent user. Upgrading now was far more valuable than charging in recklessly. System notifications popped up continuously in his mind. Scrap metal from an old hospital bed, sections of a rusted filing cabinet. Every single piece of metal within the clinic, Suemo absorbed like a ceaseless, burning furnace, meticulously claiming all the leftover metal inventory he could detect. The fatigue grew heavier, but he didn't stop. After about 15 minutes, the cold mechanical notification tone arrived. Proficiency maxed out. Steel Fortress leveled up from LV2 to LV3. Two new abilities unlocked. The first, Scalpel Blade, expends mental strength to manifest a throwable blade for long-range attacks. No physical proximity required. The second, Metal Resonance, passive scanning, automatically sensing any nearby metal, with rare metals highlighted especially. Suemo instantly understood what this meant. His eyes were no longer limited to what he could visibly see. At that exact moment, angry voices boomed from outside. "Skinny Monkey, what the hell are you guys doing in there? Found him yet?" It was Zhang Biao. His patience was wearing thin, his voice growing louder, more aggressive. A calmer tone followed. The strategist, Glasses Man, spoke in an unsettlingly cool manner. "Biao, something doesn't feel right. 3 men have been inside this long and not a single sound out of them. Unless they're all dead. That kid might not be ordinary. His car was ridiculously tough." Skinny Monkey rammed into it and screwed up his own vehicle instead. Biao didn't reply, but his heavy silence spoke volumes. He was starting to suspect something was off. Standing in the quiet, empty hallway, Suemo glanced at the darkened back door. The upgrade was complete. His skills were ready, and Lin Yao was still waiting in the car. It was time to finish this. The back door opened, just like that. No shouting, no sounds of struggle, no unnecessary noise whatsoever. The creaky, old wooden door let out a soft groan, and Suemo stepped out. His face carried a trace of weariness, but his expression was calm, like someone who'd merely taken a short rest indoors. In the courtyard, 2 men stood frozen. One of them was stunned, the other tightened his grip on his knife. Zhang Biao was the first to react. His knife's blade pointed straight at Suemo as his voice turned steely. "Where are Skinny Monkey and the others?" Suemo didn't respond. He simply scanned the two with an indifferent gaze. But in that very moment, Suemo had already analyzed everything about them down to the smallest detail. The newly unlocked passive ability from his level 3 Fortress Heart skill quietly activated. Within 10 meters, the positions and shapes of all nearby metal objects surged clearly into his mind. Zhang Biao's belt buckle, the keychain in his pocket, even the fastening screw inside his machete's handle, it all mapped out vividly. As for the bespectacled strategist next to him, the situation was just as clear. Hidden deep in his suit's inner pocket was a compact handgun. It was well concealed, but not well enough to escape Suemo's newly awakened sight. Inwardly, Suemo felt a quiet sense of certainty settle over him. Zhang Biao, smug in his presumed dominance, had no idea that Suemo had laid him completely bare. The strategist adjusted his glasses, his nose twitching as he picked up on the looming threat. In a low tone, he whispered, "Biaoji, this guy silently took down Skinny Monkey and his gang. He's no simpleton. His vehicle's also not normal. There's a good chance he's a gifted too." Rather than retreat, Zhang Biao stepped forward, puffing out his chest. He slapped the flat side of his machete against his burly chest, causing a dull thud to echo. "A gifted? So what? I've never been afraid of anyone. I'm D-rank, muscle hardening. Blades, bullets, even elite zombies can't scratch my skin." He glanced over at the van in the corner, his gaze sweeping briefly toward the figure inside. An ugly, self-satisfied grin cracked his face. All right, here's the deal. I'll give you a chance. Let's make a bet. I'll let you take 3 hits. Use a knife, a stick, a gun, whatever you want. If in 3 moves you can't hurt me even a little, you kneel and call me Big Brother. Oh, and the girl in the van. She'll be coming with me too. Deal. Suemo looked at him, a long, deliberate look. His lips curled into an almost imperceptible smirk. Perfect. A new skill needed a test run. 3 moves. Deal. The knife slid from its sheath, a blade that had once pierced the scavenger leader clean through. Suemo lunged forward, swift and deadly. His target, the center of Zhang Biao's broad chest. Zhang Biao didn't dodge. In fact, he stepped forward, meeting the strike head-on. The moment the blade met his chest, things began to go horribly wrong. The knife didn't pierce. Instead, the tip bent sharply upward. A metallic clang rang out, and in the next second, the blade snapped clean in half. Zhang Biao's chest bore nothing but a faint white mark, not even a scratch on his skin. He threw his head back in laughter, the sound reverberating through the yard. Huh, that was it. That's your first move? Can't even leave a scratch. Tickles more than anything. His eyes flickered briefly toward the van and the woman inside, his grin widening with triumph. Suemo tossed the broken blade aside, his expression calm and unyielding. Move 2, he announced. He clenched his right fist. Then, a dull, metallic sheen shrouded his knuckles, creeping up like liquid steel. In a heartbeat, his entire right arm, up to the shoulder, gleamed with an otherworldly metallic coating. The strategist's eyes went wide, his voice rising in alarm. Biaoji, his arm, his gift is. Before he could finish, Sumo's fist came crashing down, shattering the ground beneath Zhang Biao's feet. Zhang Biao staggered back 3 full paces, his enormous chest imprinted with the outline of a fist. That kind of strike would have obliterated anyone else. But Zhang Biao? He was still standing. In fact, he was still grinning. Second move? Not bad. Still nowhere near breaking my skin. Face it, kid, a loss is a loss. His gaze drifted again toward the van, to Lin Yao seated inside. The message was loud and clear, the bet was still on. Lin Yao clenched her fists. She had seen the force of that punch, had watched it leave only a shallow imprint on Zhang Biao's iron-hard body. His D-level defensive gift rendered his muscles more like steel plating than flesh. Suemo flexed his right arm, the metallic luster receding as he shook it off nonchalantly. You've got a tough shell, I'll give you that, he said coolly. Then he stopped, no longer charging forward or striking any defensive pose. Instead, he raised his right hand. A low vibration hummed through the air. It started as the faint scrape of metal particles grinding together, spreading outward like ripples on water. Suspended above Sumo's palm, a pinpoint of silvery light began to form. Slowly, the light solidified into a slender, sharp blade, a 10-centimeter-long metallic projectile, so thin it gleamed translucently, exuding an icy chill that filled the courtyard. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. The light intensified, bending the surrounding air ever so slightly. For the first time, Zhang Biao's arrogant grin faltered. That small, floating dagger radiated an aura that sent chills down his spine. It felt more dangerous than anything he'd ever encountered, more so than even the most fearsome of elite zombies. Biaoji, move, the strategist shouted, his hand darting toward his jacket pocket. Move? Against this? I'm blade-proof. Bulletproof. What the hell do I have to fear? Those words would be Zhang Biao's last boast. He charged forward, every ounce of his power surging into his hardened skin. His complexion darkened, resembling burnished iron as he swung his machete upward, rushing head-on toward the floating blade. Suemo had been waiting for this precise moment. Go! With the whisper of a command, the blade shot forward, a streak of silver lightning. It was too fast, faster than the eye could follow, faster than Zhang Biao's hand could position his weapon to block it. All he could do was meet the strike head-on with the full resilience of his hardened flesh. Schluck! The sound was unnervingly soft, as if piercing silk instead of flesh. Zhang Biao's body froze mid-motion. He looked down, disbelief clouding his eyes as he registered the thumb-sized hole in his chest, clean through, front to back. The small blade didn't stop. After piercing him, it continued forward, blowing apart the wall behind him and embedding itself deep into a patch of concrete far away, leaving nothing but a bottomless puncture mark. No, impossible, Zhang Biao gargled, barely managing the words. The D-rank gift he had taken so much pride in, utterly worthless against that flash of silver. His massive frame crumpled to the ground, sending up a plume of dust. The back courtyard fell silent. A deadly silence. The man with glasses, who seemed like the mastermind, had his hand frozen on the firearm at his waist. He stared down at Zhang Biao's lifeless body, his face twisted in shock and disbelief. Then he shifted his gaze to Su Mo's palm, where a faint silver glow slowly faded. The strongest state of a D-level defensive ability had been pierced through in a single strike. Even a C-level offensive ability couldn't guarantee such an outcome. Could this guy's ability be at the B level? Or even higher? Inside the van, Lin Yao kept her eyes on the hole in the wall, the result of the earlier fight. She stayed silent for a long time. Zhang Biao's body wasn't even cold yet, and Su Mo's gaze was already fixed on the man with glasses. It wasn't an evaluating stare. It felt more like he was appraising him, like a piece of merchandise. Feeling that heavy look pressing down on him, Wang Ming's legs gave out, and he collapsed to the ground, knees hitting with a dull thump. Moments earlier, he had witnessed with his own two eyes a silver dagger materializing out of thin air. It had pierced cleanly through Zhang Biao and the wall behind him. Zhang Biao, this supposed indestructible brute their gang treated like a war god, hadn't lasted even a second. Su Mo spoke just 2 words, "Your name." Wang Ming stammered his name out and immediately launched into a sales pitch. He spilled everything he knew in one breath. Locations of the 3 major strongholds in Star City, the distribution of their forces, stockpiles of supplies. He went on and on about his MBA degree, his expertise in resource management, and his network of connections. His words tumbled out fast and furious, as if he feared that even a brief hesitation might cost him his life. Su Mo listened, silent for a moment, then replied, "I don't need a self-proclaimed smart guy." Those words cut sharper than the flying knife. The eager expression on Wang Ming's face froze. He understood immediately. Su Mo wasn't doubting his capabilities. He was calling him out for what he truly was. A man like Wang Ming, the kind who could betray his former allies so effortlessly, wouldn't hesitate to do the same to Su Mo tomorrow. The logic was simple. In the apocalypse, intelligence wasn't in short supply. Loyalty, the kind of reliability where you could entrust someone with your back, was the real rarity. Wang Ming tried to plead his case, but Su Mo had already lost interest. His final sentence was spoken with icy resolve. "Say what you want. Your fate is the same, death." Wang Ming laughed nervously, a wild, almost unhinged sound, as if he had resigned himself to the worst. All the while, his right hand subtly crept into his pocket. What Wang Ming didn't know was Su Mo's ability, metal resonance. Within his vicinity, no movement of metal could escape his notice. With a low hum, Su Mo's foot was suddenly encased in a matte metallic sheen. In one swift motion, he kicked out. Wang Ming's right wrist shattered instantly, and the force of the blow sent him flying over 10 meters away. He landed hard, writhing in pain, unable to get back up. Only then did Wang Ming say what Su Mo had been truly waiting for. A name. Li Hao. Li Hao, the eldest son of Star City's powerful Li family, backed by the infamous Falcon Alliance. The Black Tiger Gang, which Wang Ming and his crew belonged to, was merely one of many small squads under his command. Their tasks ran the gamut, from securing outposts to hoarding supplies and, occasionally, abducting women. Su Mo clenched his fists slightly at the mention of the name. That face, arrogant and fearless, appeared vividly in his memory. The customized BMW off-roader. That cold, cruel smirk. The kick that had sent him sprawling to the ground, accompanied by the scornful words, "Useless trash at the bottom of the chain, fit only to die." It was a debt Su Mo would never forget. Wang Ming caught a glimpse of the intense look in Su Mo's eyes and assumed he had struck a chord. He babbled enthusiastically, talking up Li Hao's awakened ability and his dominant status in this world. A C-level talent, insanely powerful. You could never take him on. But then Wang Ming revealed the real shocker. "You think killing us is the end?" I already sent out your info. Your car, that pretty chick with you, everything. He didn't get to finish the sentence. Sumo's expression remained unreadable, but the air suddenly grew heavy. The message was already sent. Li Hao's side now knew where Sumo was, recognized his vehicle, and worse yet, identified Lin Yao. A situation that had been so clean and resolved just moments before had transformed into something far more complicated. In the east part of the city, inside a fortified villa, a man nicknamed Black Bear sat at his desk, sorting through piles of daily intel. He tossed one report after another into the trash without so much as another glance. One of those reports had come from the west. It detailed how a small five-man squad from the Black Tiger Gang had gone missing under suspicious conditions. Witnesses claimed it involved a wildly overpowered Wuling Hongguang van that had somehow destroyed a Range Rover in direct combat. Black Bear chuckled, crumpling the report and tossing it into the bin. A Wuling van taking out a Range Rover? Either they were scared out of their minds before dying, or they made this up to cover for hoarding supplies. He had far bigger issues to worry about: the ongoing fight for the grain warehouses in the southern district and tracking elite mutant movements in the north. Now that was intel worth delivering to Li Hao. As for that backwater clinic in the west and a few small-time nobodies, not worth bothering with. A few kilometers away, that mocked Wuling Hongguang van was parked tightly against the back door of the clinic, silent and unmoving. Inside, Sumo leaned back in the driver's seat, eyes closed, eating to replenish his strength and regain his focus. Not long ago, Wang Ming, with his dying breaths, had gasped out one last name: Li Hao, Falcon Alliance. Wang Ming had thought dropping the name might save his life. He had ranted that the Alliance's firepower would soon arrive, that the woman by Sumo's side was doomed to be someone else's plaything, that Sumo was finished. But Sumo had no patience for nonsense. The moment that name left Wang Ming's lips, his fate was sealed. A single, emotionless stomp ended it decisively. One more clue to his enemies, gained at the cost of nothing but bare minimal effort, not even a bullet. Inside the clinic, Lin Yao was sorting through medical supplies. At one point, she stepped out to report to Sumo, her pale face betraying discomfort. She mentioned a few corpses inside, horribly disfigured ones. Sumo gave her a two-word response: keep going. Occasionally, debris skittered across the pavement outside, carried by the wind, producing faint metallic sounds. Sumo's passive ability, metal resonance, acted like an invisible detection field, keeping him aware of every metallic object within a 10-meter radius. Lin Yao's movements, the squeaking of the supply cart's wheels, an old iron rod scraping outside the door. He sensed it all. For now, there were no threats. He had 1 hour. In 1 hour, the medical supplies would be loaded onto the van, and they'd move on. Vein-like paths spread through his body, slithering beneath his skin like a sinister parasite. Time seemed to slow, every second dragging on, as if the universe itself wanted her to feel the weight of what was unfolding. The road. Li Hao, a member of the Falcon Alliance. The intelligence handler probably never imagined that while he was crumpling up the report in disdain, someone seated in the shabby little van he had mocked for a full minute was already adding his boss's name to an imminent reckoning list, one no one else could see. Sumo had said something that Lin Yao would never forget: "Your body belongs to me." At the time, she didn't argue, not because she agreed, but because she hadn't been quick enough to respond. So, in the pharmacy at the clinic, she addressed the issue in the only way she knew: a pragmatic, clinical approach. She placed an unopened box of condoms into the supply crate. From a medical professional's perspective, it was akin to iodine or saline solution. In a post-apocalyptic world, an unplanned pregnancy wasn't just a personal risk, but a liability for the entire group. She packed the box, closed the crate, and thought the matter was settled. The problem arose when they were leaving. The crate was heavy, and Lin Yao had trouble holding onto it. The moment Sumo stepped in to take it, the crate tipped slightly, and a few brightly colored little packages tumbled out onto the ground, right at Sumo's feet. Lin Yao's brain zeroed in on one question. Could she pretend she hadn't seen it? The answer? No. Sumo had already bent down, picked one up, flipped it to scan the back of the packaging, glanced at the size, and straightened up to face her. His gaze was calm, like he was commenting on the weather. Too small, he said simply. I need the larger size. Just one sentence. Lin Yao froze in place, flushing from her ears down to her neck. She wanted to explain, to say it was just part of the medical supplies, a calculation for survival, a decision supported by clinical data, but the words stuck in her throat. Nothing came out. Su Imo casually tossed the box back into the crate, picked the whole thing up with one hand, and loaded it into the van without another word. But Lin Yao's thoughts had already spiraled out of control. She couldn't shake the image of Su Imo in battle earlier, his arms, his legs, reinforced with raw, gleaming metal. His ability allowed him to strengthen any part of his body at will. Any part. Her ears burned unbearably. Get in. Time to go. Su Imo called, already in the front passenger seat, the van's engine rumbling. Lin Yao fumbled into the driver's seat, that single phrase, the larger size, blazing in her mind like a brand. As the van left the clinic, the camouflage technology installed on the vehicle ensured that the roaming zombies outside ignored them entirely. Lin Yao exhaled deeply and slid a small notebook over to Su Imo, forcing herself to focus on logistics. Turn left at the next intersection. 2 kilometers ahead, there's a Lurley bargain supermarket in an old residential area. It's remote, so it might not have been raided yet. Su Imo took the notebook, glanced at it, grunted, set it aside, and closed his eyes. The crumbling streets blurred in the window's periphery as Lin Yao kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead. The way this man could make a comment like that with the same tone he used for noting a turn in the road, it was impossible not to overthink it. As they neared the supermarket, the next challenge remained unclear in her mind. What awaited them? She wasn't sure yet. When the van finally pulled over, Su Mo's right arm was already showing alarming signs. The wound from earlier, left by that mutant creature, was turning a sickly blackish blue along its edges. It wasn't just bruised. The discoloration seemed alive, creeping steadily up the veins on his hand. It slithered beneath his skin, inching upward as if some tiny monstrosity swam just beneath the surface. The sight left Lin Yao's stomach in free fall. Her mind immediately flashed to fragmented descriptions she'd seen on forums. A few survivors had documented similar symptoms, infections caused by unique mutant creatures. The results? Agonizing symptoms, fever skyrocketing, loss of consciousness. The endgame? Death, or worse, turning into something else entirely, something mindless, driven purely by base instinct. Su Imo didn't say a word. He gritted his teeth, cold sweat beading on his temples, his breathing growing heavier with every passing moment. He lifted his hand to steady his head, but partway, the infected arm convulsed uncontrollably. The crawling blackness seized the opportunity to spread further. Lin Yao didn't hesitate this time. She lunged for the medical kit in the back, furiously searching until she yanked out a bottle of amoxicillin. She pulled out a pill, grabbed a water bottle, and turned toward him. Su Imo, take this. Now, before she could press the pill into his hand, her wrist was seized in a vice-like grip. His strength and speed caught her off guard. The water bottle slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor, the pills scattered everywhere. Su Imo pulled her toward him, pinning her down in the cramped space of the van's back seat. His expression was no longer composed. His eyes burned with something primal, something untamed, something terrifyingly raw. Lin Yao fought fiercely, placing her hands against his chest and calling his name, desperate to break through. It didn't help. Then a single thought pricked her consciousness like a needle. His words from that day echoed eerily in her memory, words he had spoken after saving her life. Your body belongs to me. At the time, she had thought it was merely a domineering quip, fueled by an almost possessive sense of control. Only now did she realize there might have been a darker, more genuine weight behind those words. Oddly enough, fear receded in that moment. She stopped fighting. If he was going to die, if he was going to become something monstrous, and if this was the last remnant of human desire keeping him grounded in his final moments. Tears welled up, slipping silently down her face, as she shut her eyes and whispered, Su Imo, if this can help you feel even a little better. She even tilted her head slightly, offering a silent surrender. Su Imo emitted a guttural groan, low and restrained. Something flickered in his eyes, a fleeting presence, drowning and struggling amidst the storm of pain and spiraling chaos. Lin Yao's heart clenched at that flicker. He was still fighting. Somewhere deep inside, he was still resisting. That realization reinvigorated her. The oppressive notion weighing on her was no longer about resignation. It was resolve. He couldn't die. He couldn't turn into that thing. She didn't have a cure. She had no guarantees. She didn't even fully understand the origin of the toxin infecting him. But she knew one thing with piercing clarity. She couldn't let him vanish into that sickening blackness. And then, the searing shock of brilliant light, a symbolic lifeline, breaking open truths and impossibilities. A desperate fight for humanity itself. Lin Yao's resolve locked into place as her world lit up with both dread and determination. Crawling through his veins, twisting and spreading toward the brain. It wasn't a slow corrosion, it was a rapid devouring. She knew exactly what this meant, just a few minutes too late, and there would be no way back. This was her gift. At this moment, in this way, she woke without any warning. She didn't overthink it. A doctor doesn't sit around and deliberate while their patient is at death's door. She cupped his face, hearing her own voice eerily calm as she spoke words that sounded more like a vow than a rescue effort. I won't let you die. I'm your doctor, and your person. Then, without hesitation, she pressed the scorching energy flooding her body straight into his. White light surged from the point of contact between them. The dark green poison, upon encountering the light, reacted like ice against hot metal, rapidly disintegrating. Rotted wounds shrank, and fresh skin began covering the damaged areas with a speed that seemed almost inhuman. Sumo's body arched, letting out a sound that was equal parts pain and release. Then his body went limp, collapsing heavily onto her, completely unconscious. The light dimmed. Only her labored breaths were left echoing in the carriage. Lin Yao could no longer move. Even her fingers refused to cooperate. She turned her head slightly, staring at his pale profile, knowing she had done it. He was alive. The poison was gone. His pulse was steady. She had dragged this man back from the brink of death. Her lips curled into a faint smile. Then her consciousness slipped away, and she passed out completely. When Suemo truly woke up, the first thing he did was assess his physical state. The wound on his arm was gone. Not even a scar remained. The searing heat that had burned through him for hours, the nerve-shredding pain of the poison, it was all gone. He felt no discomfort. On the contrary, a long-lost sense of vitality coursed through his body as if someone had rebuilt him from the ground up. This wasn't natural recovery. He knew all too well what kind of poison he had been exposed to. Fragments of memory began to piece themselves together. The fever, losing control, the warm sensation pouring in from outside and suppressing the toxins. He looked down. Lin Yao was lying beneath him, tears still lingering on her lashes, her athletic clothing torn and disheveled, and a small dark red stain visible on the seat. Suemo said nothing. Carefully, he raised himself off her, scanning the mess in the carriage. Quietly, the events clicked into place. She had saved him. At that moment, Lin Yao's lashes trembled. Her eyes opened, first with confusion, and then, upon realizing Suemo was right in front of her, her face flushed red. She lowered her head immediately, not daring to meet his gaze. The car was silent except for the sound of their breathing. Suemo spoke first. Lin Yao's shoulders gave a small, involuntary shake. Her voice was barely audible as she whispered, "It's nothing," before drawing a deep breath. As if summoning all her courage, she finally looked him in the eye and said, "Suemo, I think I've awakened an ability." An ability? Grade A. Lin Yao spoke of it as casually as if she were describing the weather. A passive skill, life insight, allowed her to perceive toxins and abnormal energies within a person. An active skill, life transfer, enabled her to transfer her own life force through physical contact to heal someone else. She specifically added, it was limited in effect and drained her mentally, leaving her utterly exhausted after a single use. It sounded like nothing more than an ordinary, high-cost healing ability. But Suemo only had to glance at her once to know she was lying. That level of weakness wasn't just mental exhaustion. Her lips were pale, her eyelids dark and heavy, her entire demeanor as though something deep within her had been hollowed out, a state of life force depletion. A grade A ability like life transfer couldn't possibly come with the simple price of feeling tired. She had drawn on her lifespan. He didn't press her on it. Instead, He reached out, his thumb lightly brushing the corner of her eye. Lin Yao froze, her heart skipping a beat like something had slammed into it. But his hand was already withdrawn as he took off his work jacket and wordlessly draped it over her. Then he moved to the driver's seat, buckled his seatbelt, and started the engine. To the supermarket. You need to replenish your strength. Just that one sentence. No words of gratitude. No further questions. No gestures of comfort. Lin Yao leaned against the passenger seat, clutching the jacket that still carried his warmth. Tears silently slid down her cheeks, but her lips curved upward in a faint smile, so subtle she didn't even realize it herself. He had seen through everything. This was his way of showing her he wouldn't forget. In the apocalypse, words were often the cheapest currency. The van stopped in a hidden corner next to the supermarket. It was an old residential area with slanted roller shutters hanging precariously. A few zombies wandered aimlessly at the street corner. Lin Yao, half asleep, opened her eyes to find Su Mo already holding out a handgun in front of her. From Wang Ming's stash. 7 bullets. She hesitated for a second before taking the cold, heavy weapon. There's a basic shooting guide on the forums. Learn on your own, he said, his tone calm as though discussing something utterly mundane. Unless I come back, or you're absolutely sure it's safe outside, don't leave the car. He opened the door and paused for a second. Keep yourself safe. Wait for me. Lin Yao watched him walk toward the tilted roller shutter, gripping the gun tightly, as something constricted in her chest. He went in alone, and all she could do was wait. When Su Mo entered the supermarket, food was the only thing on his mind. The roller shutter was partially open. He crouched low to slip inside, the clang of metal reverberating briefly as he scanned the entrance area. Shelves, refrigerators, checkout counters. No large moving targets, no unusual signals. The coast was clear. Shelves were toppled over, and the floor was a mess. It was evident people had scavenged this place repeatedly, but there were always neglected corners in places like these. Su Mo moved quickly through the narrow, cluttered aisles. His movements were precise, his focus sharp. A few stray zombies lingered in the background, but he avoided them, making sure not to attract any attention. As he compressed biscuits, bottled water, canned luncheon meat, enough to last a few days. The supplies were piled in a corner near the back door. Just as he was about to head upstairs, the metallic resonance came. It wasn't a signal from within the supermarket. It came from outside the front entrance, loud, and involving more than one vehicle. He quickly ducked into the shadows of a large freezer, holding his breath. 3 black modified off-road vehicles screeched to a stop in the clearing near the front door. The car doors opened one after another, and a team of figures in identical black tactical gear emerged. Their vests were strapped with ammunition clips, and their hands gripped assault rifles. Casually, they dispatched the stray zombies, trailing them with such smooth precision it looked like they were following a practiced routine. No hesitation, no disruption in rhythm. This wasn't the kind of chaos those thuggish misfits led by Zhang Biao were capable of. These people were trained professionals. Through the shattered glass, Su Mo could see the emblem on the side of their vehicles. The Falcon Alliance, a team under the Li family's command. Judging by their equipment, this was their elite unit. The man leading the group wore a black mask that concealed all but his sharp, hawk-like eyes. He scanned the entrance and spoke in a low, clear voice. The last signal from the target was here. Little Bear must be hiding inside. Team A and B, spread out and sweep in a fan formation. Team C, seal off the back door and side windows. Not even a mouse comes out. He paused briefly. The target must live. That's an order. In less than 10 seconds, every exit from the supermarket was blocked. Sumo's heart sank. Earlier, his dilemma was how to haul the pile of supplies out of here. Now, the problem was far more serious. He was trapped inside. A dozen heavily armed, highly coordinated professionals were sweeping through the building. Handling a few scattered threats was no problem for him, but taking on a team like this head-on, he had no chance. But things were about to get even more complicated. The metallic resonance behind him, just off to the side of the freezer, detected another signal, a different one. This wasn't a mechanical device. It was a tablet computer, and it was moving ever so slightly. That area was a tight gap squeezed between several toppled shelves, nearly impossible for anyone to notice. Yet someone was there, hiding, using that device for something. Suemo stayed still. The intruders outside were after someone called Little Bear, and Little Bear was most likely 2 meters behind him. The situation was delicate. He was caught in the middle. Ahead was an elite team ordered to bring back the target alive, and behind him was an entirely unknown person of unclear origins, concealed in the shelf crevices, operating some kind of equipment. There was no reason for Suemo to assume this Little Bear was an ally. But then again, there was no reason to give away his position either. Bang! The supermarket's front doors were roughly kicked open, beams of intense flashlights slicing through the dim aisles. The chaos truly began when a Tesla plowed straight into the supermarket. An entire glass wall shattered into flying shards. The electric vehicle barreled inside like a cannonball, mowing down 3 armed team members and the shelves they were near. The sound of bones breaking overwhelmed all the shouting. From behind the freezer, Suemo could see clearly. There was no driver. The entire sequence lasted no more than 10 seconds. First, a few lifeless drones suddenly blinked red and dove straight towards squad members nearby, prompting the first shot fired. That single gunshot triggered an outburst, as the entire team reflexively opened fire, plunging into utter chaos. At the same time, their tactical earpieces emitted an ear-piercing ultra-frequency screech that ruptured right alongside their eardrums. Deafened, they all yanked their earpieces out in panic. And just as they were starting to reset, the Tesla came crashing through the wall. Drones, earpieces, electric car, these were all being controlled by the same person. Sumo's metallic resonance had already locked onto the concealed figure in the shelf crevices before the chaos erupted. A slender hand, fingertips pointed towards the drones on the ground, releasing something silently and invisibly. That one image alone had set off this chain reaction of madness. This was his only window of opportunity. Suemo burst out from behind the freezer, sprinting towards the collapsed shelves. He ripped away the panel covering the gap. Inside was a small figure, wearing a cap pulled low, petite almost to an extreme, clutching a tablet like her life depended on it. The screen was still flashing. Lines of code continued streaming down. That's when Suemo noticed several recognizable login interfaces, military logistics systems. He didn't even have a moment to think it through before blood started trickling out of her nose. No, I can't. The tablet slipped from her grip, her body collapsing forward. Suemo caught her instinctively, her weight shockingly light, barely 100 pounds. But the still vibrating tablet in his hands churned his thoughts at lightning speed. Someone able to remotely control drones, hack into tactical headset frequencies, and commandeer an electric car, all on technical skill and raw talent alone. That put her at least at a B-level aptitude, potentially verging into A-level. Even more crucial were those military system logins. If she could actually access those, the intel she could uncover, supply point coordinates, safe zone layouts, enemy communication hubs. Information in a post-apocalyptic world was everything. A top-tier hacker's value had been calculated before, on par with a B-level combat expert. No wonder the Falcon Alliance sent an entire elite squad to capture her alive. Damn it, it's a trap. That little brat's got backup. Take him down. From the direction of the entrance came Scar's furious shout. Despite their temporary deafness, their professional instincts remained intact. He immediately locked on Suemo's position. In that split second, Suemo made a calculation. They needed her alive, so bullets were less threatening. They wouldn't dare risk her safety. He turned his conclusion into action. Snatching up the glowing tablet with his left hand, he shoved it into his coat. With his right, he hoisted the unconscious girl onto his shoulder like a sack of flour. Scar's voice roared instinctively. "Don't hurt little bear." That one shout crushed Suemo's final hesitation. They had a dozen men, armed to the teeth. Suemo had an unconscious hostage slung over his shoulder, and just then were several small USB drives. This wasn't just any backpack, it was hers. Suemo threw the bag into the front seat and looked at Lin Yao. "Drive." Lin Yao didn't need to be told twice. She slammed the gas, and the old van roared to life, speeding out of the now ghostly silent area. The girl, Rosie, still lay unconscious in the back seat, her fragile body seeming even more insignificant against the stark reality of what had just played out. Suemo stared out the window, his face impassive, though the tension in his jaw betrayed his thoughts. The satellite call from Scarface wasn't something he could ignore. Somewhere out there, powerful forces were now aware of them. Whoever had picked up that half-finished message would surely send reinforcements. What now? Lin Yao asked, her grip firm on the steering wheel, but her voice steady, like someone too used to danger to ask stupid questions. Get out of this area first, Su Mo replied sharply. He rested his metallic right arm against the door, looking toward the horizon like he could see the trouble heading their way. Then we plan. Lin Yao nodded, focusing on the road but stealing the occasional glance at the rearview mirror. The girl, dubbed Little Bear by Scarface's team and now confirmed to be a genius hacker named Rosie, clearly wasn't just any ordinary target. For people to go to such lengths to secure her, whatever knowledge or skill she had must be worth more than the lives of every single one of Scarface's elite team. They'll send drones, armored units, specialists, Lin Yao muttered under her breath. They'll spare no expense. Likely, Su Mo said curtly, running his hand over the USB drives he pulled from Rosie's backpack. Whatever secrets these drives held, they might make things even messier if they got into the wrong hands. Or really, into any hands at all. A few minutes passed in silence, the only sound being the hum of the van's engine and the faint noises of the unconscious girl's shallow breathing. Where should we go? Any safe havens left? Lin Yao asked, almost rhetorically. No safe haven lasts forever, Su Mo replied, his tone flat, like he'd learned that lesson one too many times. Head for the outskirts for now. Somewhere quiet. This girl's fragile, but I need answers when she wakes up. Out of the corner of her eye, Lin Yao glanced at Su Mo's leg, where the blood from his earlier injury was beginning to seep through his pants. She pressed her lips into a thin line, but didn't ask questions. Su Mo wasn't the kind of person you asked if he was all right. His pain tolerance was inhumane, and he wouldn't waste time explaining what he considered a non-issue. After a while, Su Mo shifted in his seat. Her condition? Lin Yao quickly glanced into the back seat before replying. Still stable. Looks rough, though. I'd say a few days without proper food and care, she'll be in a real bad way. She needs rest, and soon. He tapped against the metal panel where a standard glove box would normally be. She'll get what she gets. We don't have the luxury of stopping till we're clear from pursuit. You really think they'll chase? Lin Yao raised an eyebrow, her careful tone showing she already knew the answer. They won't stop for anything else, Su Mo said plainly. Not when someone like her is involved. Hearing this, Lin Yao tightened her grip on the wheel, her foot pressing a little harder on the accelerator. She didn't need to know all the details. When Su Mo said someone like her, she could fill in the blanks. Someone valuable, someone dangerous, someone worth more trouble than they already seemed to be in. Feeling the weight of the moment, Lin Yao flicked off any last remaining indicator lights on the dashboard, running the van in low-power mode to avoid detection. We'll go dark, she mumbled to herself, a decision already made and executed. Good, Su Mo acknowledged from the passenger seat, his voice low, almost distant. He leaned his head back against the seat, briefly closing his eyes. The metallic sheen of his arm reflected the faint streetlights as the van sped through deserted streets. They had a long night ahead, and trouble always runs faster than you'd like. But, as always, Sumo's focus wasn't on the fairness of the fight, only on how fast he could outrun it. A student ID card was tucked inside. The photo on it was of a girl with pigtails, her features youthful and innocent. Big amber eyes gazed timidly into the camera, making her look no more than 15 or 16 years old. But the information on the ID made Su Mo pause for a second. Name, Luo Shi. Age, 17. Faculty, Computer Science and Technology, Xingqing University. Enrollment date, September 2021. Enrolled in 2021, she'd be a senior by now. Xingqing University, Computer Science, a classmate of his. These three details struck Su Mo simultaneously, dredging up a distant and almost forgotten memory from his college days. 3 years ago, the university had admitted a prodigy, a 14-year-old girl. He distinctly remembered the headline from the news report. 14-year-old genius girl excels in national informatics competition and gains admission to Xingqing University. The articles noted her extraordinary talent, but also mentioned her struggles. Jumping grades left her too young to fend for herself, and her introverted, aloof personality made it hard for her to fit in. She was said to spend most of her time wearing headphones and buried in lines of code. The campus forums were rife with rumors about her, about how she could hack into the academic administration system to change grades, or how, during a live demonstration, she reportedly breached a renowned cybersecurity firm's firewall using only an ordinary laptop within minutes. Back then, no one knew how much of those tales were true or fabricated. But the Falcon League knew. Li Hao knew. They had dispatched a special ops team with a singular mission: capture Cub alive. Suemo glanced down at the little bear charm dangling from his hand. It was round and pudgy, worn and old, but still there. Apparently, her codename wasn't chosen at random. The Cub, who had been hunted by the entire Falcon League as a high-value target, was none other than this computer prodigy who looked like a middle schooler. And now, she was lying unconscious in the back seat of his van, her electronic devices sealed away in a metal case, her injuries untreated, her abilities dangerously unstable. Suemo flipped the student ID over, gave it another glance, and tucked it back into his bag without a word. But in his mind, he had already pieced things together. A top-tier hacker, the innate talent to manipulate electronics, and possession of that SSS-level fortress heart. 3 factors converging in a 17-year-old girl. What did that mean? It meant she wasn't just a simple survivor. She was a game-changer, a brain who could disable enemy electronic devices, disrupt signals, and commandeer systems. People like her were rarer and more valuable than an entire squad of heavily armed soldiers. Suemo stepped out of the car and began to clean up the battlefield. Engaging his metal resonance ability, every metallic object within a 10-meter radius entered his consciousness: guns, magazines, knives, spades. Their precise locations, quantities, and conditions were laid bare, as clear as a map in his mind. He worked fast, disarming the field like a meticulous technician, wasting no energy on unnecessary movements. 7 assault rifles, 2 were ruined, their barrels deformed and beyond repair, thanks to his metal manipulation during the fight. The remaining 5 were in decent condition, along with 2 standard-issue pistols. He carefully packed those away. Ammunition was the real prize: bullets tucked in tactical vests, magazines, and pouches. In total, he gathered 25 rifle magazines and 8 pistol magazines, roughly 1,200 rounds of ammunition. Every piece of equipment was standard-issue military gear, nothing black market. Suemo hefted one of the pistols, his movements casual as he spoke. The Lee family, or maybe the Falcon League, they're pretty cozy with the military. That single statement might not seem like much, but it spoke volumes. He loaded 3 operational tactical vests, a military-grade knife, a high-powered flashlight, a basic medical kit, compact rations, and bottles of energy drinks into the van. The vehicle's rear seat, already crowded, turned into a makeshift storage hub, boxes piled upon boxes, leaving Luo Shi barely enough space to curl up in a corner. Lin Yao sat in the passenger seat, a few handguns wedged awkwardly between her legs. Suemo, we're running out of room, Lin Yao said softly, glancing nervously at the cramped rear space crammed with weapons and supplies. The sight of the assault rifles was enough to turn her stomach a bit. If there's no space, then ditch something. Food, meds, and ammo take priority, Suemo replied without looking up. He strode toward the 3 SUVs that had been part of the ambush. The trunks were locked, but he didn't waste time looking for keys. Placing his fingers on the metal, his abilities surged, and with a crunch, he pried the steel frames apart as if peeling a soda can. Inside were more resources: a case of individual military rations, a box of bottled water, 40 liters of gasoline, and an unopened carton of cigarettes. He transferred the food and water to his van, used the gasoline to fill the tank, and casually tossed the cigarettes into the driver's side footwell. Things like that were premium barter items in a post-apocalyptic world. By the time he slid back into the driver's seat and started the engine, the van was pulling out from the supermarket parking lot. "How's she doing?" Suemo asked, glancing in the rearview mirror at the unconscious Luo Shi. Lin Yao activated her talent, Life Insight, and fell silent for a couple of seconds before replying. "Severe mental exhaustion, a healing concussion, though it's recovering slowly. She's malnourished, probably hasn't had a proper meal in a long time. She needs rest and high-calorie food. She's not in immediate danger, but as for when she'll wake up, it's uncertain. After a slight pause, Lin Yao added, her talent must take a massive toll on her mental state. Suemo tossed Luo Shi's student ID to Lin Yao. Her name's Luo Shi, 17, computer science major at Xingqing University. She's probably the cub, the top-tier hacker that the forum stories used to talk about. Lin Yao took the ID and looked at the photo. The girl in the photo was green and fresh-faced, with hints of baby fat and a clean, innocent smile. She looked every bit the part of an ordinary college freshman. She stole a glance at the pale, petite figure curled up among the supply crates in the back. Cub, the name that commanded caution and reverence across the forums, was hard to reconcile with the innocent features on that student ID. Suemo gradually brought the car to a stop near the entrance to the Golden Bridge building materials market. The Wuling minivan idled about 10 meters away from the entrance, engine still running. The scene before him was nothing like the ruinous chaos he'd expected. High walls and an iron gate surrounded the market grounds, with cleared pathways inside, sandbag-fortified firing points, and several guards clad in black tactical uniforms standing watch, gripping assault rifles. These weren't family personnel. Another faction was here. Another force. The task here was already accomplished. Lin Yao's voice dropped to a whisper. This place is already taken. Suemo didn't reply. His right hand rested lightly on the steering wheel, while the passive metallic resonance of his gift quietly began scanning ahead. His calculations before coming here were thorough. The van's space had long been insufficient. Upgrading the vehicle wasn't an option. Its armor thickness and internal capacity were maxed out. Relying on scraps from abandoned vehicles on the roadside for upgrades was laughably inefficient. The steel section of the construction supply market was where he really needed to be. Besides, there was an unresolved forum post about this location, rumors of a highly mutated elite zombie. Extremely fast and with a high danger level. Its crystalline core and potential special loot made it a risk worth considering. He came here to kill two birds with one stone. Only, at the gate, a group of armed men stood guard. The difficulty of this run silently increased a level. In the back of the van, there was an injured person, still recovering and in need of rest. Beside him sat Lin Yao, a gun on her lap. And further back in time, a 17-year-old hacker they had just snatched from the grip of the Falcon Alliance. The kid was unconscious, their identity and worth yet to be determined. Before the trip, Suemo had been clear with Lin Yao. Until this girl proved her value and allegiance, she was a captive. Soft-heartedness will only get you killed, he'd said. In this apocalypse, there were no exceptions to that rule. Lin Yao had nodded solemnly at the time, but how much she truly understood, Suemo couldn't be sure. On the way, he had handed Lin Yao a can of beef. She froze when he opened it with his knife and passed it to her. Her voice was choked as she thanked him. The apocalypse hadn't been going on that long, but even a can of meat could move someone to tears. It wasn't weakness, it was the raw reality of their survival. Protein needed to be replenished, strength maintained. Pure logic, no sentiment. Sumo's gaze shifted back to the iron gate. He analyzed the guards, their positions, weapons, and stances, all at a glance. The camouflage of their rundown Wuling minivan still held. In the dim blood-red light of the night, under the eerie gaze of the blood moon hanging in the sky, it wasn't particularly conspicuous. Slowly, his metallic resonance spread further, mapping the contours of the structures within the walls ahead. When the guards stopped their van, Suemo had already cataloged their surrounding weapons, a total of 4 long rifles, several combat knives, and scattered iron pipes. No heavy weapons, but a solid number of people. One man, wearing camouflage and holding an old shotgun, walked over and tapped on the window. His tone carried an air of condescension. This is a base under the Iron Shield Alliance, protected by Zhao Gang, a B-tier ability user with the blood of the Berserker. It's clean inside. If you want in, pay the entry fee, per head. Suemo didn't get out of the car. Calmly, he stated there were 3 of them. From the back, he brought out a vacuum-sealed 5-kilogram bag of rice along with 2 bottles of water and handed them over. Enough. The guard weighed the goods, then gave a smug nod and waved them through. Suemo shifted sideways, casually blocking the guard's view of the passengers in the back seat. The iron gate opened just enough for the van to squeeze through. The moment the van crossed the threshold, Sumo felt it. Lin Yao stiffened, completely froze. It wasn't pain or faintness, but rather that particular, tense rigidity that came from someone forcing themselves to suppress an intense reaction. Following her line of sight, Sumo glanced out the side window. A man in his 30s with impeccably styled hair stood not far off, his arms around two heavily made-up women. The man was laughing, gesturing freely, his demeanor one of utter ease. He didn't look like someone scraping by in this hellscape. Quite the opposite. He seemed to have carved out a very comfortable niche for himself here. Sumo's metallic resonance silently locked onto the man. He noted the knife tucked in the man's waistband and the clinking keys in his pocket. "You know him?" Sumo asked, his tone neutral. Lin Yao's chest heaved with harsh, shallow breaths. The look in her eyes was something Sumo had never seen in her before. Something fierce, something raging. "Chen Yu," she said in a low, venomous rasp. "My fiancé." Sumo didn't reply, but he understood immediately. This was the man who sold her out for 2 biscuits. The one who nearly got her killed. And now, here he was, draped in women, secure within the walls of a shelter, living the high life. In a voice only Lin Yao could hear, Sumo quietly said, "Don't rush. He's inside now. There's nowhere for him to run." Lin Yao sucked in a deep breath, forcing down the fury that threatened to spill over. She understood. Making a move here would mean challenging Zhao Gang's entire territory. 3 people in a beaten-up van stood no chance. But as the van rolled further into the shelter, Chen Yu's gaze briefly drifted in their direction, settling momentarily on the silhouette in the passenger seat. The tinted windows concealed Lin Yao's face. Chen Yu merely found the shape familiar, hesitating for a second, before turning back and resuming his flirtations with the women. Yet, subtly, his hand slid into his pocket, pulling out his phone. His thumb hovered before opening a communication app. The main road of the shelter had been cleaned up. People bustled in and out of warehouses and shops on either side. Windows reinforced with wooden planks and metal sheets gave the area a marginally safer appearance. Survivors gathered in small groups, chatting quietly, alert but functional. Compared to the chaos outside, it was organized, but just barely. Sumo steered the van through the streets without a glance back. But he'd already memorized Chen Yu's position in his mind. Behind him, Lin Yao hadn't missed a word from outside. She knew that voice. Chen Yu, her ex-fiancé, was now standing on the far side of the van, reporting their shabby old van to someone over the phone. He claimed it was blocking a container and mentioned the vehicle seemed empty, promising he'd keep an eye on it. But Lin Yao was inside that very container, no more than 2 meters from the van door. Sumo gestured at her to stay silent, his expression calm and unreadable. His preparations had been meticulous. The van's rear had been parked to perfectly block the container's only exit. A rifle was mounted at a small observation window at the container's side, its barrel trained on the open lot outside. Chen Yu stood directly in its firing line. This makeshift stronghold, Sumo had put it together in less than half an hour. The blue shipping container behind the stack of steel plates was concealed, the door's padlock intact. He simply crushed the metal shackle with his bare hands and pulled the door open. Inside, the space was surprisingly tidy. Wooden carpenter templates laid neatly on the floor, 3 double-decker iron bunk beds, and even storage shelves. Before the apocalypse, someone clearly lived here, someone meticulous. Now, it was abandoned, becoming their temporary bargain. Rosie had been placed on one of the folding cots inside, still unconscious. Outside, the flick of a lighter sounded, and the acrid smell of a cheap cigarette wafted through the gaps in the container. Chen Yu hung up his phone. Now, it was just him talking, a lazy drawl that carried every word clearly into the container. "Ugh, that woman just now. Looks just like that bitch Lin Yao." Lin Yao's breathing went deathly quiet, acting all high and mighty. Chased her for so long, and she wouldn't even let me touch her. He took another drag, his tone becoming filthier, lewder, reveling in the apocalypse as if it were a windfall. He started ranting about how the women who used to ignore him probably ended up as someone's toy now, laughing as if he was gloating over a jackpot. Inside the container, Lin Yao gripped her sleeve tightly, her body trembling. She thought she'd seen through him long ago. She thought she'd built up enough hatred, enough so that he couldn't hurt her again. But at this moment, As his every word drilled into her ears, she realized. Knowing who he really was didn't shield her from the sting. Because this was the man she once agreed to marry, someone she believed could at least maintain a shred of decency. And now, with his own words, he shredded that notion into non-existence. Suemo said nothing. He didn't move either. He simply leaned against the container wall, his gaze fixed on the small peephole, his lips curling ever so slightly into an icily sharp smirk. Outside, Chinyu kept rambling on. The sensation of a scalpel against his throat wasn't the kind of wake-up call he had in mind. Chinyu opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Lin Yao squatting in front of him, her face cold and unyielding, the tip of a scalpel pressed against the side of his neck. He tried to sit up, but one of her boots was already planted against his chest. "Don't move." She issued the command with just 2 words before cutting straight to the point. "Explain to me about Brother Long." Chinyu's mind started spinning at lightning speed. Rewind about 20 minutes. He was standing outside the container, smoking and talking shit, bragging about how, after the apocalypse, women would do anything for as little as a slice of bread, boasting that he had already grown bored of the few he had and how, if he ever came across that bitch Lin Yao. His sentence was interrupted by a noise from inside the container. Curious, he leaned closer to the gap, ears pressed to the steel. He froze for a moment, then broke into a dirty grin. Based on the sounds, he thought it was some couple's private moment. He started fantasizing aloud about whether he'd have the chance to join the conversation. Amused, he even commented how the woman inside was more vocal than those minor celebrities he'd been with. He never imagined the source of that sound was the very bitch he was bad-mouthing. And the situation? It was a decision Lin Yao made herself. As Chunyu's words floated carelessly through the air, Lin Yao had already stepped up to Suemo, cupping his face in both hands, and kissed him directly. It wasn't a hesitation, nor a prelude. It was a decision. She'd taken precautionary medication that afternoon, relying on her instincts as a doctor to prepare herself. There was no need for words, and Suemo didn't ask any questions. The cot squeaked at the far corner of the container, while Chunyu obliviously played the eavesdropper outside, relishing every second of it. His enjoyment was abruptly interrupted by a sudden scream from the other side of the construction market. The sound startled him enough to jolt backward, his back pressing against the steel wall of the container. He hadn't yet processed what was happening before a hand reached out through the steel. Matte finished metal, with precision targeting the carotid sinus on his neck, delivering a swift and decisive strike. Chinyu didn't even have time to cry out before collapsing like a puppet with its strings cut. Now, he was conscious again, lying sprawled on the container's wooden floor. Suemo leaned nearby against the container wall, his face utterly indifferent. That hand from earlier, it had been Sumo's. Lin Yao, wrapped in Sumo's work jacket, held a scalpel tightly in her hand. It was a tool she once used to save lives. Moments ago, she'd used the handle to jab the acupuncture point under Chun Yu's nose to wake him from unconsciousness. Now, the blade's edge pressed coldly against his throat as she interrogated him about Brother Long. Chun Yu's first reaction was a performance of feigned joy. "Yao Yao? You're alive. I knew you'd be okay. It's such a relief." Lin Yao didn't flinch. The scalpel's point pressed ever so slightly deeper. Chun Yu shut his mouth. He knew full well it was him who'd revealed Lin Yao's location to Brother Long. But Brother Long had mysteriously vanished, neither dead nor alive. Could it be Lin Yao had taken him out herself? His gaze darted towards Suemo briefly before snapping back. This was exactly why men like Chun Yu were so infuriatingly difficult to deal with. Even with a blade to his throat, his first instinct wasn't to confess, but to weigh his options. He was calculating how much Lin Yao knew if any of it could be proven, and just who this man Suemo was. He was still gauging what little leverage he might have left. With the scalpel against his throat, Chinyu forced a smile. His face flitted between expressions: innocence, sincerity, even pitiful, all well practiced. He began spinning countless excuses. He was forced. Brother Long had abilities far beyond normal, and refusing to spill Lin Yao's location would have cost him his life. He ranted about how much he wanted to find her, how dangerous things were outside with so many zombies, and how following Boss Zhao was the only way to survive with food and safety. He promised that if Lin Yao came with him, he'd ensure she lived comfortably. His words tumbled out in a ceaseless flow, as if rehearsed, utterly desperate to not let silence take hold. Lin Yao didn't respond. She crouched down, fishing his phone out of his pocket. What are you doing? She shoved the screen in front of his face. Unlock it. Chen Yu's eyes darted uncertainly for just a second before he tried grasping for more lies. But when he glanced up, he caught Su Mo's unrelenting stare. Without hesitation, he extended a finger. WeChat opened, its top pinned chats lined up neatly. Lin Yao tapped into a group and immediately played an audio message. The speaker blasted loud and clear with Chun Yu's drunken voice, boasting about last night's dalliance with a college girl, trading her services for half a. The situation with the biscuits was resolved, but Lin Yao was acting like some untouchable saint, not even allowing anyone to touch her hand. Zhao, the gang leader, had promised that as long as resources were sufficient, he could procure anyone, even campus queens or social media stars. Chen Yu muttered under his breath innocently. Men exaggerate. Don't take their words seriously. Lin Yao ignored him, her fingers swiping across her phone screen. She found the chat labeled as Brother Long. The latest voice message there had been sent the day before Su Mo saved her. She pressed play. Brother Long. Good news. I've sent you Lin Yao's location. Yes, that doctor, the stunningly beautiful one. Haha, Brother Long. Remember you promised me 2 packs of cigarettes and a bottle of water. Oh, thank you, Brother Long. You're the best. The recording ended. The room fell silent, the kind of deafening silence you feel deep in your bones. Chun Yu's face drained of all color, his lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. Lin Yao threw her phone at his head. She stood before the man who had once promised to protect her for a lifetime, feeling only nausea. Her life, had been exchanged for 2 packs of cigarettes and a single bottle of water. Not because he had no choice, not under duress, but willingly, with fawning gratitude, calling out, Brother Long, you're magnificent, as though he was thanking a god. Slowly, her hand lifted the surgical scalpel. Chen Yu turned his head sharply, locking his gaze on Su Mo, who had remained silent the entire time. It was as if he'd found his last lifeline. He began talking about Su Mo's skills, how the Iron Shield Alliance had a bright future. He argued that following Zhao, the leader, was the ticket to success, that in a world like this, power, rank, and wealth reigned supreme. Then he promised women, actresses, influencers, campus queens, all within his reach. He argued that if they spared his life, he could set them up with any woman they liked. Women far better than Lin Yao with her holier-than-thou act. He said they could discard them when they got bored and replace them with fresh ones. Shut up, Lin Yao said. Though her voice wasn't loud, Chen Yu immediately fell silent. Holier than thou. She thought about the time she'd literally shortened her own lifespan by 10 years to save Su Mo's life. She hadn't even blinked at the cost. Chen Yu didn't know about that sacrifice, but some things didn't need to be known to be unjustifiable. Some people, even if you lay out all the facts for them, will only think you're a fool. Lin Yao held the scalpel tightly as she looked at the pathetic man at her feet. She needed to decide what to do with him now. In that moment, Chen Yu thought he had figured Lin Yao out. She held the scalpel, tears still on her face, her body trembling. This woman couldn't kill anyone. He'd seen too many people like her. Whoever they were before the apocalypse remained the same during it. They couldn't change. His eyes lit up with triumphant glee, so obvious that he didn't bother hiding it. And then he began talking again, his words flowing more smoothly with each breath. He spoke about leadership roles, guns, and supplies. He described the good life under Zhao's leadership, endless promises of wealth, status, and more. And finally, he circled back to women. He got down to specifics. He narrated, in disgusting detail, the charms and features of certain actresses and influencers. He promised that as soon as they agreed, these women would be delivered overnight. As he spoke, he didn't notice that Lin Yao's expression had entirely changed. She wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at him. Her eyes, which moments ago had been shiny with tears, now held only one thing: possession. Are you bold enough to talk about offers like that? In front of me, about my man? Without warning or hesitation, the scalpel struck. A flash of cold metal at his neck, precise, swift, and merciless. Chen Yu's mouth was still open, his smug grin frozen forever. The only sound he managed was the guttural hiss of air escaping his throat as the blood gushed out, painting Lin Yao's face and body crimson. She stood there, chest heaving, still gripping the weapon tightly. That strike, there was no tremble, no hesitation. It was as if it had come from an entirely different person. Suemo stubbed out his cigarette and stepped in front of her, silent. He looked down at her, his calmness betraying neither surprise nor emotion, as though this turn of events had been entirely within his expectations. Lin Yao raised her head to meet his gaze. Her lips quivered as she whispered, "Suemo, I can't do it like you." She knew what drove that scalpel. Neither cold calculation nor calm judgment, but an uncontrollable surge of fury. Suemo bent down, picked up the bloodied scalpel, and handed it back to her. "You don't need to be like me. You're Lin Yao. You're a doctor. That's enough. A knife is just a knife. Whether you use it to save lives or take them, that's up to you. He deserved to die. You killed him. And that's exactly as it should be." Lin Yao grasped the handle of the scalpel. After a moment of silence, she asked, "Suemo, if I hadn't killed him, would you have abandoned me?" "Yes," he replied instantly, his voice unwavering. She wasn't surprised. That had always been who he was. He never sugar-coated anything, never cared about sentiment. His belief was straightforward. If you were useful, you stayed. This was the apocalypse. Emotion was the cheapest currency in existence. But then he added, "But I knew you would. And next time, just use a gun. It's easier." Lin Yao murmured a quiet acknowledgement. That single word carried the weight of something breaking and then mending inside her. She took a step forward, then another, until suddenly she threw herself into Sumo's arms, burying her face in his chest as she let out all the tears she'd been holding back. This time, her sobs were different, not those choked with struggle and despair, but ones of release and relief, as if something inside her had finally snapped free and grown stronger in its place. Her hands, the hands of a doctor born to save lives, were now stained with blood. Suemo stiffened momentarily, but didn't push her away. The moment he stepped into the cargo container, the cold metallic resonance was an alert in his mind. Someone holding a gun was waiting for him. It wasn't Lin Yao. He had just spent 10 minutes outside breaking down half the construction material in the market, scraping together enough resources to upgrade his fortress level from 400 to 1,400. Objectively, it was a flawless move. But the minute he crossed the threshold, every signal screamed at him that something was wrong. A gun barrel pressed against his temple, and behind it was a figure standing on tiptoes, small and poised. A figure, Rosie, the girl they had been carrying along the entire way, who was supposed to be peacefully unconscious on a cot, was now clutching Lin Yao's gun with her slender hands. The barrel of the gun trembled slightly, but she showed no intention of lowering it. Suemo didn't move. The first thought that crossed his mind wasn't how to neutralize this threat, but rather, why had his metallic resonance only detected this gun just before crossing the threshold? Rosie had been inside the entire time. The gun had been inside the entire time. He should have sensed it much earlier. The answer to that question posed a far greater danger than the trembling gun before him. When Suemo pushed open the door and stepped in, he was greeted by a firearm aimed directly at him. It was one of his own guns, usually stashed in the vehicle as a backup, but now it was in the hands of a little girl no taller than 4'10". Her wrist was trembling slightly, but the barrel was pointed resolutely at his chest, her expression one of fearless determination. "Rosie." His eyes quickly darted to the cot, where Lin Yao clutched a thin blanket, her complexion a mix of embarrassment and discomfort. In an instant, Suemo pieced together what had happened. "Don't move. You villain. Let this lady and the pretty sister go," Rosie shouted. Lin Yao panicked, struggling to sit up, her voice hurried and faint. "Rosie, don't act impulsively. He's a good person. He's the one who saved us. Pretty sister, don't worry." Rosie interrupted, raising her voice without sparing Lin Yao's words a second thought. "I heard everything. You said stop. You said you're going to kill me. And now he's left you all alone here. He has to be a kidnapper. He's definitely up to no good." Lin Yao's face instantly turned scarlet. The thin blanket was pulled up to hide most of her face, leaving only her mortified eyes visible. Those eyes reflected a mix of shame, anguish, and an overwhelming desire to evaporate from sheer embarrassment. Those words, She hadn't thought, not even for a second, that this little girl had overheard all of it. That's not what. Anyway, he's not a bad person. Put the gun down, Lin Yao insisted. Rosie sighed heavily, the look on her face filled with frustration, as though she were severely disappointed. Pretty sister, have you developed Stockholm Syndrome? Don't let him fool you. Su Imo stood motionless, calmly letting the dark muzzle of the gun remain trained on him, a faint flicker of amusement playing on his lips. He didn't look the least bit threatened. Without saying a word, he turned, headed over to the supplies box, dug out a self-heating military meal pack, and tore it open. Slowly, he poured water into it and closed the lid. The label on the package read Beef Hot Pot, and instantly, white steam began to hiss from the edges, sending a mouth-watering aroma wafting throughout the container. Rosie was completely ignored. Hey, I'm pointing a gun at you. Can't you see that? Suemo slowly turned back around, his calm gaze landing on the gun in her hands. The safety's still on. Rosie froze for a second, reflexively glancing down. Sure enough, the safety was still engaged. That moment of hesitation was all Suemo needed. He moved. Rosie felt a sudden numbness in her wrist as the weight in her hands vanished. By the time she realized it, the gun was already securely held in Sumo's grip. She jumped up to grab it back, but Suemo casually lifted his arm, keeping the weapon well out of her reach. She swung her hands in the air to no avail, hopping twice in vain. With a nonchalant move, Suemo placed the gun on a high shelf nearby, completely out of reach. He didn't even bother giving her a second glance. Rosie stood there, her cheeks puffed and red with frustration, stomping her feet as tears of anger welled in her eyes. The air inside the container was thick and stifling, the rich aroma of spicy beef broth wrapping around them and making everything feel even more suffocating. Suemo tilted his head down, using a fork to gently stir the bubbling hot pot, showing no interest in her protests. Rosie stood frozen in place, her small face red with a mix of humiliation and rage. The gun was gone, her escape plan had failed, and most importantly, she hadn't managed to rescue the pretty sister. Still, that didn't mean she had no cards left to play. She inhaled deeply, shut her eyes, and struck a pose that seemed utterly bizarre to an outside observer, spreading her arms slightly, fingers twitching as though summoning something unseen in the air. She muttered under her breath, "Invade, control, command all electronic devices in this space to obey my will." It had worked before. Just days earlier, she had transformed a Tesla into a makeshift missile, sending it hurtling through a group of pursuers and throwing them into chaos. Her S-class ability, electronic interfacing. In theory, as long as there were connected or electronically controlled devices nearby, she was the most dangerous person in the vicinity. 1 second passed, then 2, then 5. Nothing happened. No phones, no tablets, no cameras, walkie-talkies, or radios. Her senses scanned for signals, over and over, met only with an unnerving silence. It was as if she were shouting into a vacuum. Unwilling to give up, she tried again, this time with even greater focus and effort. Still nothing. Rosie's eyes snapped open, filled with a flicker of genuine panic. Without lifting his head, Suemo murmured, "All electronic devices are in that metal box. Powered off." A mechanical toolbox with a physical lock, sealed shut. Rosie gritted her teeth, her eyes darting to the vehicle blocking the entrance, a van. If there's a vehicle, there's an electronic system. If there's an electronic system, that's all she needs. Closing her eyes once more, she marshaled all of her energy and focused intently. The van didn't move an inch. Not even the headlights flickered. "That's because it's a gas-powered car," Suemo said flatly, his tone as calm as if he were reading a weather report. "No smart driving capabilities." Rosie froze. She looked at the unremarkable, utterly unsmart old van, and then back at Suemo, who was calmly blowing on a bright red piece of beef dangling from his fork. In that moment, every ounce of her pride, her sense of purpose, and her self-image as a genius hacker crumbled like a house of cards under the deafening growl of her stomach. Grrrrrrrr. She hadn't had a proper meal in 2 days. After fainting from mental exhaustion earlier, she had only been holding on out of sheer willpower. Now, hunger, frustration, and defeat mixed into an unbearable cocktail, and the tantalizing aroma made it impossible to hold back. Her small mouth quivered, and tears began to roll down her cheeks without any warning. With a loud plop, she sat on the floor, wrapped her arms around her knees, and buried her face in her arms. The tablet for a moment, her hesitation barely hidden. But hunger and survival instincts prevailed over doubt. She quickly nodded, clutching her device with newfound determination. Her tiny sparks of rebellion were no match for the looming threat of this man, nor the unignorable scent of stewed beef in her nostrils. As her fingers danced across the screen, the tension in the room started to simmer down, punctuated by the faint hum of electronics she was manipulating. Within minutes, a detailed offline map of the hardware depot and surrounding structures glowed on the screen, complete with corridors, probable ambush points, and exits. "There," she muttered, pushing the tablet towards Suemo. She sounded detached, but her shoulders were tense, some part of her bracing for the next phase of his scrutiny. Suemo glanced briefly at the map, his sharp mind already analyzing the wealth of information. A slight nod was his only response, as though silently acknowledging her usefulness. He placed the tablet aside and turned his attention back to the munitions scattered in the corner, already absorbed in forming plans, calculating risks, and assigning probabilities in his mind. But Rosie's role in this story was far from over. She may have surrendered momentarily, but she was still measuring every step they took, counting every shadow on the wall, weighing the angles of their trust. Survival meant playing two games simultaneously, compliance on the outside while preparing for a clean escape inside her head. Lin Yao remained silent beside Rosie, observing the dynamics unfold. Her intuition tapped lightly on the edge of her mind, whispering clues, though she stayed outwardly neutral. Something about Sumo's demeanor wasn't as detached as it appeared. Lin had known people like him before, those who carried the burden of their pasts like phantom weights. "She'll come around," Lin Yao said softly to Suemo when Rosie wasn't listening, her voice tinged with something close to reassurance. Suemo responded with a low grunt, neither agreeing nor arguing, burying himself in the task at hand. In Rosie's world of probabilities and plans, her instincts told her one thing was clear: as dangerous as these people might be, they were her safest option for now. Her eyes, though half shut in feigned drowsiness, kept flicking back towards Suemo and Lin Yao, trying to parse their subtle nuances. The warm broth and meat in her belly reminded her for a fleeting moment of something lost, the comfort of normalcy, of someone looking out for her. But as quickly as the thought came, she brushed it aside. This was the apocalypse, and sentimentality was a luxury she couldn't afford. If she was going to survive with her wits intact, she needed to understand these people better and figure out whether being part of their world was better than going back to being hunted alone. The next decision she'd have to make wouldn't just be about her stomach. It'd determine her future. As the room slipped into a quiet rhythm of preparation and guarded companionship, Rosie's gaze dropped back to her hands. For now, she would play along. Because in a world where she was hunted for her talent, aligning with Suemo was less about trust and more about strategic alignment. Her whispered thoughts circled back to one question: how much would she need to sacrifice for the illusion of safety? And could she do it without losing herself completely? It was self-evident. Suemo carefully weighed his options, and the decisions he made reflected a survivalist's precision. The van wasn't just a transport vehicle anymore. It was evolving into a mobile fortress, a home that could fight, run, and sustain life even in the harsh, unforgiving world they were trapped in. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of blood orange and deep crimson, a stillness settled over the camp. But to those who lived in this shattered world, it wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet that lurked before chaos struck. The kind of quiet that kept you gripping the edge of your seat, expecting the unexpected. And yet, for now, the only sound in the air was the faint hum of the van, transformed from an inconspicuous people mover into an unyielding stronghold on wheels. Its interior now bristled with function, purpose, and silently screamed, survival at any cost. Inferior to weapons. After upgrading the circulation system, a new set of pipes appeared under the car, and two small panels were added beneath the central console. These panels displayed the air quality and water reserve levels. The basic version of the feature wasn't flashy. It filtered out dust and some harmful gases, while collecting and minimally purifying condensation and rainwater, though it wasn't yet safe for direct consumption. But it was the expansion ports that made Sumo stop and take a closer look. The air circulation port had the potential to be connected to medical-grade oxygen in the future, a feature that could be life-saving whether braving high-altitude regions or navigating through areas engulfed in toxic red mist. As for the water circulation system, someday it might even support hydroponic plant growth. The vehicle's overall upgrade progress stood before him. Basic armor reinforcement complete, basic spatial folding complete, basic weapon system mounting complete, basic circulation system complete. Completing all basic upgrades unlocks the intermediate upgrade plan automatically. This note hung quietly at the bottom, almost as if it were silently biding its time. Sumo glanced at the notification but remained silent as he closed the car door. He didn't yet know how many points the intermediate upgrade would require. But he knew one thing for certain. This car was no longer the same as it was when they started. With only 428 points left and this newly transformed mobile fortress, what lay ahead would depend on their ingenuity and determination. Bigger challenges were still ahead. Bodies don't stay hidden for long. The abandoned oil barrel sitting in the corner of the container yard couldn't mask the problem for much longer. Chenyu's body had barely been stuffed into it before the rotting stench began to seep out. Hard to ignore. It would only take a single patrol guard on the graveyard shift clearing trash to stumble upon the smell, and all hell would break loose. It wouldn't take long for the words, "Chenyu's been killed," to make their way to Zhaogang. Inside the vehicle, Lin Yao and Luo, she had already climbed in. Sumo checked their positions through the rearview mirror. Without saying a word, he focused his thoughts, and the engine roared to life. Outside, the commotion grew closer. 7 or 8 guards formed a fan-shaped perimeter, led by a burly bald man nicknamed Ironhead, one of Zhaogang's squad leaders. Armed with an old submachine gun, he pointed its barrel directly at the driver's seat with a voice full of menace. "Listen up, whoever's in the car. Get out now. Was it you who killed Chenyu? Hand over your supplies and beg for forgiveness on your knees, and maybe, just maybe, I won't kill you like dogs." Virum boom. At that moment, the Wuling Hongguang's engine let out a roar completely disproportionate for its humble appearance. Before Ironhead's team could react, the minivan, indistinguishable from any other pre-apocalypse budget vehicle, shot forward like a beast awakening. The rear hatch slammed shut, and with a sharp skid, the car's tail whipped around in an arc. 2 guards caught off guard on the left side were swept off their feet by the maneuver, crashing into a shipping container with a metallic clang. Ironhead, stunned and enraged, pulled the trigger. Rat-tat-tat-tat. The others followed suit, unleashing a hailstorm of gunfire. Bullets pinged off the windshield and hood in tiny bursts of sparks. And nothing happened. The glass didn't shatter. The body wasn't riddled with holes. All the bullets left were faint scratches on the armored plating before ricocheting harmlessly away. Sumo knew the car could take it. Not even standard military-grade guns could penetrate this armor, let alone the shoddy firearms these guards were using. But Ironhead didn't know that. He stared at the minivan, a seemingly ordinary target, unharmed after an entire magazine's worth of rounds, as if his eyes might pop out of his skull. What the hell? What kind of freaking car is this? Grabbing his walkie-talkie, his voice cracked with panic. "Quick, contact Brother Gang. Get the demolition squad over here, now." The demolition squad. That raised the stakes. Hiding behind an oil barrel, Ironhead smirked, seemingly comforted by the staccato bursts of gunfire coming from his 2 machine gunners. Yet in reality, the rounds churned up nothing but dirt, hitting everything except the target. Not a single shot grazed the occupants inside. Peeking out from his cover, Ironhead sneered and shouted at the top of his lungs. "What? Just 2 little girls? Not even grown enough to play with guns properly." That remark reached Luo Shi's ears. Her cheeks flushed, half with anger, half with adrenaline-fueled exhilaration. Fixating on the tablet in her hands, she glanced between its screen and Sumo, who was steadily flooring the accelerator in utter silence. Suddenly, she spoke up. "Sumo, give me control of the weapons system." Her voice was calm and resolute. Sumo caught her gaze in the rearview mirror, immediately understanding her intent. He wasn't ignorant of Luo Shi's previous attempts to hack into the vehicle's systems. Time and again, she'd made attempts, only for every single one to be rejected outright. Not by firewalls, but by his unique SSS grade trait, absolute control over his vehicle. Without his permission, no one else could override it. The demolition squad will be here any second, Luo Shi reminded him. You need to decide now. Suemo didn't waste a second. Central console. Plug in. Luo Shi leapt to the middle row and plugged in the data cable. Before the soft click of the connector faded, the system's alert rang clearly in Sumo's mind. User Bear Cub is requesting access for weapon system control. Approve. Approve. In the next 30 seconds, Luo Shi's hands danced across the tablet with practiced precision. Her words, muttered under her breath, might have sounded like gibberish to most folks, but they carried her sharp focus. Authorization protocols, control agreements, sensor integration, target identification, ballistic calibration. Each step was seamless. Each step was perfect. Finally, the two mounted machine guns atop the car emitted a faint mechanical whir. The electric motors hummed as gears clicked into place. The gun barrels lowered slightly, rotating slowly until locking onto the cluster of enemies huddled behind their makeshift cover. There was no wild, random spraying. Every movement calculated. Every target locked in. Fire, Luo Shi commanded, slicing her finger across the screen. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. This wave of firepower was entirely different. Instead of being scattered and aimless, the bullets followed trajectories calculated with pinpoint precision, threading expertly through gaps and hitting targets behind barrels, crates, and abandoned vehicles. No cover was safe. Even in the tightest crevices, the projectiles unerringly sought their mark. A guard peeked out, and his head exploded instantly. Another tried to sidestep and reposition, but a bullet tore through his abdomen, dropping him to the ground. The air was filled with screams of agony. This time, Ironhead didn't laugh. He was pressed tightly against the cover, his spine tingling with fear. Just moments ago, he'd been cursing two ladies for their lousy aim. Now, the two machine guns in their hands seemed uncanny, as if they had eyes of their own, leaving no room for anyone to breathe or retaliate. One man, about to fire back, didn't even get the chance to lift his weapon before he hit the ground. Every last ounce of their defiance had drained away. The surviving ones? They were crying in desperation, running for their lives. On her tablet, Rosie watched as the red dots on the screen disappeared one by one. Slowly, the corners of her mouth curled upward in satisfaction. But Sumo's furrowed brow didn't relax. The demolition team hadn't arrived yet. And now, out of ammunition, 400 machine gun rounds were gone in moments. The bodies littered across the plaza weren't even cold yet, and now the ammo belts lay empty. Lying by the machine gun, Rosie turned her head towards Suemo with a sheepish expression. We're out. It was at that very moment that the Hummer came crashing through. Zhao Gang, the leader of the opposing shelter, was a B-class gifted individual. His ability, called Blood of the Berserker, made him stronger, faster, and harder to take down the more injured he got. In other words, the worse you hurt him, the meaner and crazier he got. Right now, his skin was a disturbing red, his eyes were bloodshot, and half his face was smeared with blood from a gash on his forehead. He licked at the blood on his lips and grinned like a madman as he slammed down on the gas pedal. Driving a steel-reinforced Hummer H2 with a ram welded to its front, he came roaring out from deeper in the market, charging at them sideways at over 80 miles per hour. Suemo swerved hard, but the underpowered van couldn't hope to outrun it. Boom. The ram smashed into the van's rear right door, sending the whole vehicle skidding sideways. Everyone inside was flung around from the force. The impact left a massive dent in the door, a first for this van, which had until now survived unscathed. Despite the violent jolt, Suemo managed to stabilize the vehicle, his mind racing with clear conclusions. The van's entry-level armored plating couldn't withstand this kind of brute force collision. Meanwhile, Zhao Gang's Hummer had its windshield spiderwebbed and its front hood deformed. But Zhao's expression was maniacal as ever. He threw the vehicle into reverse, prepping for another strike. His underlings, who'd been cowering moments earlier, now poked their heads out, cheering gleefully as they noticed the machine guns had gone silent. For them, the fight had only just begun. The B-class berserker was wounded, and that's when he was most dangerous. Zhao Gang was mid-laughter, the words, "You're all dead," still on his lips, when his maniacal cackle came to an abrupt halt. A deafening roar ripped through the atmosphere, originating from the abandoned warehouse district deep within the construction market. The sound wasn't like anything human, or even remotely animalistic. It was a gut-wrenching scream packed with raw savagery and bloodlust. A sound so intense, it drove nails into every eardrum. It was the unmistakable announcement of something massive, asserting its presence. For a moment, the entire plaza froze. Zhao Gang's arrogant grin vanished completely. His voice cracked and quivered for the first time as he shoved open his door and shouted, "It's it. That thing is here." The gunfire brought it over. Before his words could even fade, the sound of something heavy barreling toward them became unmistakable. The chaos came closer and closer, crushing all in its path. Brick walls toppled, cars flattened. Unstoppable devastation aimed directly at the battle zone. A flash of shadow later, Zhao Gang's reinforced Hummer H2, steel plates and all, was crushed into scrap metal by a single downward blow. Every person in the plaza, whether hiding, observing, or previously cheering like fools, wore the exact same expression, the terror of seeing something that simply shouldn't exist. Bullets were completely useless. As shots rang out, the bullets hit the creature's body with sharp, metallic clangs before ricocheting away. Not a single scratch was left behind. Before anyone could comprehend this horrifying reality, Ironhead was slammed into the ground by a single strike. Not knocked away, not knocked down. He was obliterated. There's now a sunken dent in the concrete where he had stood, his body unrecognizable. It was in that instant that Suemo got a full look at the monstrosity. It had a metallic exoskeleton, blood-red compound eyes, and massive forelimbs shaped like scythes, each as tall as a person. A mutant mantis. And judging by its overwhelming presence, not just any mantis, a leader-class mutant. The creature let out a rumbling growl, and all around, it was met with an answering chorus. From the hidden crevices of abandoned storefronts, from the shadows at the corners of warehouses, and from between heaps of construction debris, swarms of smaller, cat-sized versions of the mantis came pouring out like a living tide. The scent of blood and their leader's command had turned them feral. Within mere seconds, the battle zone became a slaughterhouse. Suemo didn't waste precious seconds watching the horror unfold. His focus whipped to Rosie immediately. "Use your ability. Scan the big one." Now, Rosie was paralyzed with fear, her breath caught in her throat at the sight of the carnage. Sumo's voice cut through her terror like a needle, stabbing her consciousness. Clenching her jaw, she forced herself to focus. Streams of data began coursing through her vision. The results didn't take long. She gasped, and fresh blood gushed from her mouth. This wasn't just some exaggerated expression, real blood splashed onto her hand. Lin Yao, quick on her feet, caught Rosie before she collapsed. Rosie's complexion was ghostly pale, and blood trickled steadily from her nose. Suemo had already dug out a high-concentrate energy bar from his bag, ripped it open, and shoved it into her mouth. "Hold it. Don't swallow yet. Stay with me." Rosie weakly sucked on the energy bar, keeping her mental faculties from completely collapsing. Her voice trembled as she managed to stammer out the results. Combat power. Over 80 times that of a regular zombie. Classification, leader class. Lin Yao's sharp intake of breath was audible. The monsters in their world were categorized in levels, starting with regular class, then elite class, and above that, leader class. Each leap in rank was roughly a tenfold increase in strength. Even the weakest of common zombies already posed a deadly threat to ordinary humans. 80 times the strength. Leader class. Just what did that mean? The crushed Hummer left no need for imagination. Suemo said nothing more. The conclusion was crystal clear in his mind. The van's armor might hold up against regular combat at best. Against this, it didn't stand a chance. Able to withstand the blows of elite-level threats, yet before a leader-level behemoth, that same defense was no different than sheet paper. Staying wasn't fighting, it was waiting to die. Hold tight. He shifted the van into reverse, pressing down gently on the gas pedal. The vehicle merged seamlessly into the chaos, camouflaged by the environment like a shadow cut from the surrounding scenery, moving silently. It maneuvered away from the panicked, fleeing crowd, evading the swarms of scythe-limbed mantises, retreating quietly through the hellscape before vanishing into the turmoil. The leader-level mantis compound eyes scanned the area, sweeping over the fleeing people, the burning vehicles. It didn't lock onto any of the disappearing vans. Suemo eventually steered the battered van into an abandoned superstore for appliances. As its shutter came down, the cacophony of fighting outside was dulled to a distant rumble. Rosie slumped against Lin Yao, her nose still bleeding, her face pale, her breath shallow. The scan had exacted a heavy toll on her, but the intelligence she had provided likely saved 3 lives just moments ago. Meanwhile, the leader-level metal mantis outside hadn't left. What unfolded outside the van windows couldn't be viewed as just a passing scene. Zhao Gang stood behind cover, his gun trained on a group of elderly folks and young children as curses crackled through his two-way radio. His demand was simple: push those people forward, use their bodies to distract the metal mantises, buying the demolition squad time to lay their traps. An elderly woman clutching her granddaughter knelt before him and begged. A gunshot rang out, and a bloody hole bloomed on her forehead. Her frail body crumpled to the ground. The little girl stood frozen, unable even to cry, paralyzed with fear. A metal mantis pounced, its scythe-like blades sweeping through the air, and that small figure vanished in an instant. Suemo turned off the engine. Inside the van, it was hauntingly still, the crushing sounds of screams and flesh being shredded pressing in from every side. "Stay quiet and watch," Suemo instructed, his tone as casual as someone giving a weather update. Lin Yao and Rosie curled up in the back seat. Neither said a word. The people being thrown out, they were the lowest rung of the shelter's hierarchy, those without awakened abilities, weapons, or even anything to barter for their survival. In Zhao Gang's strategy, they weren't people. They were expendable resources, disposable shields. Anyone who tried to run back was shot dead on the spot. Anyone who hurled insults or fought back was silenced with bullets to the chest. This wasn't chaos. It was a carefully premeditated tactic. "This is the apocalypse," Suemo remarked flatly. Tearing open a packet of food, he began to eat without hesitation. He explained that the world they now inhabited ran on the primal rule of survival of the fittest. Morality had no place here. It couldn't even last the first month. There was no point in wasting energy on anger because anyone who let anger consume them was already dead. He urged the 2 women to eat and regain their strength, casually warning that it might soon be their turn. His tone was no different from an observation that dawn was approaching. With trembling hands, Lin Yao picked up a pack of instant noodles. Before, she had thought Suemo was merely cold-hearted. Now, she truly understood. It wasn't cruelty, but clarity. He saw the truth for what it was and chose to stop deluding himself. In this world, naivety wasn't just a flaw. It was a death sentence. Without consciously realizing it, she found herself leaning slightly closer to him, not because he was kind, but because he possessed power. And in the apocalypse, power was the only thing that mattered. Rosie, too, subtly shifted closer, gripping the hem of Lin Yao's clothes tightly. Her eyes, however, kept darting toward the driver's seat. This man terrified her, yet she knew he wouldn't throw her to the wolves. And in a world like this, that was already a rare thing. The battle raged on until dawn broke. Corpses clogged half the access points, and the flickering light of Molotov cocktails turned the hardware market into a temporary inferno. Zhao Gang's strategy had proven effective. A swarm of metal mantises had been obliterated, their advance halted by traps and explosive charges. The demolition team seized the opportunity to rig every path with tripwires and explosives. By trading hundreds of lives, at least on paper, the operation seemed to yield results. But that leader-level metal mantis, it was still standing. Its massive exoskeleton bore scorch marks, one compound eye shattered and leaking viscous green liquid. One of its front limbs was partially severed, its movements clearly slowed. But it was alive, still commanding the battlefield. And the aura it radiated showed no signs of weakening. As dawn approached, the battlefront completely collapsed. Zhao Gang was the first to flee. The demolition team stayed behind to cover the retreat, only to be torn apart without even the chance to scream, caught in the sweeping blades of the metal mantises. The deafening roar of armored SUVs revving in the opposite direction faded into the distance as survivors' curses, cries, and desperate pleas blended into the overwhelming noise of the advancing swarm. When daylight began to pierce through the lingering smoke, the ground was a sea of carnage. Hundreds of human corpses mixed with the mangled remains of thousands of mantises. Yet, standing amidst the ruin, the leader-level mantis was still there. Its compound eye scanned the wreckage slowly, until it stopped. It had locked onto Sumo's van, hidden in the shadows. "It's seen us, Sumo drive." Now, Rosie's voice cracked with a sob, her whole body retreating into Lin Yao's arms. On her tablet, the calculated probability of success blinked coldly, 0.37%. It wasn't just low, it was practically non-existent. While the mantis leader's health was down to 30%, its armor had only lost 35% of its strength. Its speed and force hadn't diminished by even a third. What little weapons they had wouldn't even scratch it. But Sumo didn't move. His hands gripped the steering wheel steadily, his unwavering gaze fixed on the blood-soaked titan before them. He'd spent the entire night watching its fighting style, and every piece of data etched itself into him. The rewards from taking down just an elite-level cleaner had been worthwhile, but this leader level could offer exponentially more. The 0.37% was based on standard calculations, but Sumo had never played by conventional rules. "Sumo, you lunatic. Charging at that thing is suicide," Rosie cried, tugging frantically at Lin Yao's arm. "Sister Yao, say something please." Lin Yao's eyes fell on Sumo's profile. After a moment of silence, she gently took Rosie's trembling hand in hers. "Don't be afraid," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "He's never let me down before." It sounded almost irrational, but she meant every word. From that cramped apartment to now, every time she thought they'd hit a dead end, this man always managed to rise above it. She didn't need to know how he'd win this time. She just knew that he wouldn't lose. The clarity of this belief was so sharp it startled even herself. Sumo spoke, his voice steady and deliberate, pacing like a drumbeat. "Rosie, scan behind us. Any smart devices with batteries, network connectivity, or remote control capabilities. Count them, locate them, assess them. Now." Rosie froze momentarily, but his tone left no room for hesitation. She closed her eyes, unleashing her innate ability, electronic interface. With full force, her mind reaching out like an invisible web. Then her eyes abruptly flew open. The entire store behind us, drones, cleaning robots, smart speakers, at least 300 devices. Most with full battery power, all remotes and networks active. The moment she spoke, it clicked, and her face turned pale. "No, it won't work. Those devices don't pack enough power to hurt it. And controlling 300 at once, it'll drain my control them." Now, the accelerator hit the floor. The unassuming van roared forward with a strength that belied its humble appearance, the steering wheel spinning sharply as Sumo turned the vehicle around, heading straight for the monstrous creature. Simultaneously, 300 devices came alive. Rosie had no idea if this battle was winnable, but Sumo was clearly past the point of giving anyone an option for retreat. For the first time in its life, the monstrous mantis leader felt something it had never experienced before: fear. When the avalanche of rubble pinned it down, leaving it unable to move, it let out a guttural, pained screech. Its enormous body was crushed beneath shattered concrete and twisted steel beams, one cracked scythe still twitching in the open air, half its head lodged against the edge of the wreckage. And in its blood-red compound eyes, that glint of terror flickered for the first time. It hadn't foreseen this. And of all things, it hadn't imagined it would be overpowered by a van barreling through a metal shutter door and a girl whose face was entirely covered in blood. When Sumo spun the van into a tire-squealing drift, everyone watching probably thought he'd lost his mind. At that speed, crashing into the heavy shutters of an electronics store wasn't an escape, it was a trap. The mantis leader, provoked into a blind rage, stormed through the wreckage after him. Shelves toppled like dominoes, and a haze of dust filled the air. This was exactly what Sumo had planned. "Rosie now," he commanded. His voice was steady, unshaken. Without waiting for confirmation, he disappeared into the depths of the store, weaving through the chaos. He led the creature along deliberately, forcing it to chase, to collide, to demolish every obstacle in its path. Inside the van, Rosie was already hunched over a tablet. Her S-tier ability, electronic interface, did exactly what the name implied. She could hijack any device with a digital protocol, rewriting its commands to her will. The store was filled with cheap drones, robotic vacuums, and battery-powered consumer electronics. All of them appeared within her mental scope now as she furiously swiped at the screen, mumbling override commands under her breath, while a thin stream of blood trickled from her nose. And then came the hum. The drone's lights blinked to life, swarming from all directions toward the remaining compound eyes of the mantis leader. The tiny machines shattered on impact, clanging and clattering to the ground, a mere annoyance, but enough to create chaos. Meanwhile, vacuum cleaners with sparking circuits slammed into its segmented limbs, and every battery-powered device it passed was overloaded at Rosie's command, erupting in bursts of white-hot sparks and miniature explosions against the base of its armored thorax. The attacks didn't penetrate. Its chitinous armor was too thick for such feeble strikes. But the concussive heat and force made the creature flinch, letting out an enraged, agonized screech as it fought to regain control of its massive body. The mantis leader went berserk. Thrashing wildly, it swung its front limbs in devastating arcs, slashing at everything around it. Shelves, steel supports, sections of the walls. It destroyed indiscriminately. Sumo's eyes were locked onto the centerpiece of the chaos. A single, massive load-bearing column in the heart of the store now displayed webbing cracks across its surface. Rosie, his voice cut through like a blade. Detonate all remaining devices at the base of the column. For a moment, there was silence in the van. Rosie understood immediately. She grasped the core of his plan at once. Collapse the roof, crush it here, and at once and for all. What? That column? She started. Do it. Rosie shut her eyes. Tears mixed with the blood streaming from her nose, dripping off her chin as her fingers hovered over the screen. The split second her hand made contact, every remaining controlled device swarmed toward the column's base, their internal lithium batteries pushed beyond their limits. And the roof above them lost all support. Tons of concrete slabs, steel beams, and merchandise plummeted down like an avalanche. Suemo couldn't quite recall how much time passed after that. He lifted a trembling right hand from the edge of the wreckage, and above his palm, strands of silver light began to coalesce. Metal manipulation, skinning blade, a skill he'd used countless times before, but never like this. Not with its energy honed to such intensity, brimming to full charge over 10 painstaking seconds. 1 second, 2, 3, the silver blade materialized, half a meter of deadly light pouring like molten steel. The mantis leader's half-crushed head remained trapped beneath the rubble, one blood red, eye still shifting faintly. Die, Suemo hissed. The silver streak flew. There was no deafening explosion, just a soft, almost inaudible sound, like a needle piercing fabric. The blade pierced the crimson eye, punched through the creature's brain core, and exited cleanly, disappearing into the debris behind it. The colossal body went utterly still. Then, 2 almost simultaneous thuds followed. Suemo collapsed to one knee, his right hand braced against the ground, gasping for breath. His mental energy was completely exhausted, his legs unable to hold him upright. Inside the van, Rosie's tablet slipped from her hands, clattering onto the floor. She crumpled into herself, her blood-soaked clothes sticking to her skin as her eyes fluttered shut. She had passed out cold. Lin Yao pushed through the car door swung open without hesitation, and someone bolted in Sumo's direction. The two of them had poured every ounce of strength they had to pin that monstrous thing here. Now, Suemo was kneeling by the edge of the ruins, catching his breath, while the aftermath of the battle lingered in the air. No one yet knew what was left in their hands after this fight, if anything at all.